You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
Welcome to a very lengthy episode of the 21.5 podcast, the podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots and their spouses.
Oh,
on this episode.
Special unpaid guests.
The group of unpaid guests has grown.
Growing and growing.
Our hosts, I suppose.
That's right. Well, we've got a really exciting episode, Max. We're going to cut out most of our normal lovable banter and regular segments because...
No Ted, no mailbag.
Oh, Ted's mentioned in like the first 2 minutes.
Well,
so
yeah, I
we'll
suppose
see.
you're right.
So we got a couple of, speaking of the mailbag, we got a couple of emails from listeners, and it's a topic that I think we need to devote an entire episode to. And it's what is it like to, if your pilot is a spouse, what's it like raising a family when one of the parents is on the road a lot? We've got a lot of questions to answer, a lot of experiences to share, and 3 really great segments with different guests to share their perspectives. So our vision for this episode was like, hey man, if you're thinking about getting into a relationship with a pilot, if you're thinking about starting a family with a pilot, here's a resource.
Yeah, I think we started talking about this a while back. We got an email from a listener that was at the regionals, and he'd written us in. I can't remember exactly, but he's like had his girlfriend, and they were thinking about like moving in together, moving to base, and then she would move in, and he wanted to kind of have some sort of explanation of what to expect as if things progress to marriage and having a family, and the whole thing is, I think that's what planted the seed for this one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's read a couple of these emails we got from the listeners and share a little bit of our inspiration here. First one's from Kevin. It says, hello, I've been listening to your podcast for a while now, and I figured I would pass a suggestion to you guys. How about a podcast centralized around airline basics from a spouse significant other point of view? I'm trying to sell my wife on making the jump from military aviation to the airlines, and I think it would be great to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly from their point of view to help set up expectations. How does it change from regionals to majors? How does it change with seniority? Just some help setting expectations and understanding the basics from that point of view could be interesting. And one more.
Dear Dylan and Max, I just listened to episode 68 with Dan. As a former Army helicopter pilot and graduate of the Army ROTC helicopter program he mentioned at UND, it was so fun listening to his stories. It took me back to my youth and the excitement I had flying helicopters at UND and in the Army. I'm now first officer at a major on the Airbus after working my way up through the regionals. I miss helicopter flying and wish there was a way I could do both. I do have a bone to pick with Ted. I alternated between uncontrollable laughing and cringing as I listened to him complain about how tiring it is to be a new father. I would love to hear a female pilot's perspective on airlines and motherhood and how they balance sleep, childcare, nursing requirements, and the mom guilt of leaving a baby at home. Women are only about 4.6% of the ATP certificate holders, but I am hoping these kinds of discussions let women know they can be pilots and mothers too. Keep up the good work, Casey. Well, I think we'll deliver on all of that on this episode.
We've got all the bases covered. So coming up, we've got 3 segments. Segment number 1 is going to be with Jackie. She's the host of the Pilot Wife podcast and a longtime pilot wife. She's going to give some...
in excess of 30 years, yeah.
Yeah. So she's going to lay out what it is like to be married to a pilot for a really long time. They've raised children, moved for different bases, gone through the whole seniority thing. So she'll start us off with a really good overview of what to experience.
And then we have our friend from college, Yllithia, and her husband, Ryan. Yllithia works at a major airline, and Ryan is the stay-at-home dad, which is obviously the minority situation, but super interesting, and I think you'll find it pretty interesting. I did.
Yeah, that was great. And then we'll finish it up with a conversation with Anna. She is a former military wife, mother of 4, and her husband, I believe, flew helicopters in the military.
And in the Navy. And then he's been through a couple airlines and now at the final stop. And we'll hear her experience, which is very different from ours. So
yeah, so lots of great perspective. We know it's a long episode. We'll have in the show notes the timestamps for each one of the segments, so that if if there's one segment that really pertains to you, you can scroll right down there and find the time of when that one starts. But we hope this is a great resource for anyone that's looking to get hitched and make a career in aviation.
Right. And now we'd like to introduce a special guest. Mackenzie, my wife, is here live in the studio with us. Welcome to the show. So Mackenzie and I were married coming up on a year, and she was kind of dropped into this whole pilot spouse situation along with 3 young kids I had from a previous marriage. So she is the stepmom extraordinaire here. But so she kind of got dropped into it, and I was actually right as I was moving from business aviation to airlines and the whole thing. So why don't you tell everyone how that worked out for you, how great it is with the free travel benefits and all of the awesome things that you enjoy being the wife of such an exceptional aviator. Go ahead. Go ahead,
I could
Mackenzie.
just sum it up with the word incredible. I mean, just start to finish, quite a journey. I think it's interesting too, because you transitioned to the airlines and then back out of the airlines and then back into the airlines, which has also been the hot mess express.
Yeah, you've experienced a lot of stability in aviation so far, which is good. I mean, you realize you can just always count on, my jobs and me being there.
Totally.
The schedule.
Yeah, the schedule is just the most reliable thing that I've ever come across. It changes. There's holidays. There's trips. It's just...
You never thought you'd have Thanksgiving in Palm Springs
No.
at the Renaissance Marriott?
No, I also never thought that I would get stuck in Colorado with 3 kids in an airport for, 12 hours. So...
Oh, yeah. That's the joys of non-revenue travel, right? You're referring to?
There's a lot.
What about Christmas this year that we spent in... where did you come visit me? Orlando.
Well, almost as
Sunny
good as
Orlando.
almost as good as Christmas 2 years ago in Ontario.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. Oh, you've got both coasts covered so far. Well, Mackenzie, you've had a pretty steep learning curve, over just a few short years. Can you talk a little bit about, like, at first you're like, what is a private jet? What's an airline? And just like learning all of these different things. What were the things that came easy to you understanding? And then what were the things that have just taken a long time to figure out?
Yeah, totally. I think it's a totally different world, and being submerged into it as somebody who wasn't wildly familiar with aviation. I grew up, my dad was a fireman, so the schedule makes a little more sense to me, but aviation makes no sense to me. So that's a huge learning curve, and understanding that every time you go to dinner, you're going to talk about airplanes. And anytime you go to a party, anytime it's a wedding, it's a graduation, it's airplanes. So you have to learn very quickly, like, the difference between a Cessna, and then there's jet Cessnas, and then there's props, and there's turboprops, and then building an airplane.
Oh, yeah. You're also experienced that, too.
Very experienced. I'll give you a picture that you can post of her buried in the total back of the empennage of the airplane. Like, I had her back there with a ratchet, like getting some bolt, because I can't fit back there, like, literally. And like sometimes I have like I literally will make a list of stuff for her to come out and do, because her hands like will fit.
I need your delicate hands,
my
dear.
I can't fit in certain things. I have to have her come out and like, look, I need you to get this bolt. It's way up there.
Yeah, so I think that kind of helped with my aviation learning curve. I think everyone has a different story as a pilot wife. In the beginning, I think it was a little bit easier. Before Max and I were married, he was home all the time. And if he wasn't home, the kid's mom had them. So it wasn't something that, I really had to deal with on my own, and then we got married, and it becomes a lot more responsibility. So Max, especially with transitioning to the airline and not having a ton of control over his schedule. In the beginning, it was like, hey, we have the kids Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And the way that our schedule works is on our time, we have the kids regardless of if Max is home or not. So I became a wife, a mom of 3 kids, and then all of a sudden a single mom of 3 kids. And I had to learn how to adapt my job to pick up and drop off and adjust my evening schedule from like seeing my girlfriends and watching The Bachelor until 10 o'clock at night to like making lunches and cooking dinner and like, being 100%. Going from having no kids to having a husband and kids overnight is
interesting.
Yeah.
0 to hero.
That's right.
Yeah. And it comes with a ton of challenges. And just like I can sympathize with, every story that is on today's episode, it's like the stuff that you don't think about. It's like, okay, 3 kids is a lot. Getting them up for school, getting myself ready, I can manage it. And then it's coming home and it's, like I said, doing dinner and packing lunches. And then it's like, oh my God, tomorrow's trash day. So you're like fiddling through the house and like I'm dragging the trash can through this like rip wrap on the side of the house. I'm like in my pajama shorts, in a robe, and the neighbor walks by and like the dog's barking and then the kids need toothpaste. And it's like, I can't do this. So, it's those are the things that you really have to, prepare yourself for. It's like, it's the little stuff that's like, and then the next morning you have to drag it in so you don't get a letter from your HOA. And it's like, Max, I don't need help with dinner, but the trash is really not my thing. It's just so many things. And you get flat tires and it's like, okay, well, if Max is gone, I'm going to call Dylan. And then if Dylan is gone, I'm going to call Sean. And if Sean is gone, I'm probably going to call the police because I'm out, The
police.
It's just like a series of unfortunate events. The pool pump explodes and Max is flying. So I call my dad and he's in Colorado and he's like, I really want to help you, but I like have no idea. I was like, well, can I FaceTime you? It's flooded our backyard. So then who do I call?
Yeah. Oh, well, I think, we touched on this in some of the segments ahead, but I think one of the qualities of a pilot spouse is they've got to have some independence. If you're super dependent on somebody else, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
It's going to be a real challenge. And some of that is learned, and I know for my wife, she's had to push the boundaries on some of that stuff of like something breaks at the house that needs to be dealt with right away. And I'm gone. Like, you're just going to have to figure it out. And I think that it can be very overwhelming, but at the same time, when you are able to overcome those challenges, it can be very rewarding and build like self-confidence and an attitude of like, I got this. And Jackie's going to touch on that in a little bit in the first segment, but have you experienced like any growth and you're like, you know what, this is actually kind of good for me in a way, even though it's a challenge?
I would say yes and no. Growing up, my dad was a fireman. So my mom was, really the brains of our household and was the same way. It's like they called it the fireman's curse. Same thing. Our backyard flooded. My mom was like, my dad was gone at the Humboldt fire for 4 weeks. So it's like having to learn those things. So I think yes. I don't think of them as learning lessons in the moment, but our pool pump breaking, I had to replace some filter or something or other. And Max came home and I was like, did you notice it's fixed? He's like, oh no, I didn't. I'm like, well, I did it myself. So if I could get some sort of, foot rub or anything, that'd be nice. So yeah, I think there's a lot in it and I've always been independent. So that's incredibly helpful. And I think it's too, just like building a community around that. I have a lot of friends that are single moms, not in aviation, but are divorced or, don't have a partner. And it's like thinking about, okay, tonight's going to be overwhelming. So maybe I invite my girlfriend and her kid over and we just do pizza. And I don't have to worry about the fact that Max has been gone for 4 days. Like, you can't see the kitchen counter. The laundry's not done. I got woken up at 2 a.m. with a bloody nose. And, prior to this, I used to sleep for 14 hours because I didn't have a husband or kids. I didn't go through that whole progression of like, having kids and not sleeping and all the stuff. It was just all of a sudden like, you are going to get woken up with everything. And, a lot of stuff that you really don't think about with 3 little boys.
Yeah. I think we hear, what's interesting is we always hear it's similar story, just with different details from every, whether, and even too, when the wife is the flyer and the husband's the stay-at-home dad, as we'll hear in the next one, or in one of our segments, that it's just different. It's not like the pool pump breaking, but it's other stuff that the opposite partner roles usually fill. It's interesting to listen to, I think. But I think another thing that's kind of interesting about Mackenzie and I's aviation sort of relationship thing is that she's really embraced like the airline system, the computer system. So I have. With her, I taught her, and she learned really quickly how to manipulate and pick up trips and drop trips and do all that stuff, because obviously you can't do it when you're flying a lot of times, and you'll miss really good opportunities. And as a junior dude, that's really important to be able to capitalize when something surfaces. So she gets like text alerts, and she's sitting at home or at her desk or whatever working, and has our system up, and I need to fill a gap with 3-day trip, and it pops up and she can grab it. She's already logged in and ready to go. So that has been really helpful too, of kind of, really kind of embracing the lifestyle we have and doing what she can too to help make it better.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point too. Like, I think if I were to give advice to anyone, and nobody's asking for my advice, so it's incredibly unsolicited, but it would be just like trying to make the best of what you can. I think it's really easy as a pilot wife to be like, why can't you just be home? And then on the private side, Max is like, oh, I got to go, do this or drop this person off and pick up so-and-so. It's like, why? Like, why can't you just pay attention to our family? So I think the biggest thing is to make the best of it. So when I have the kids and it's a weekend and Max is gone, it's like, okay, well, where's Max's overnight? Can I pick the kids up from school and take them to the airport and non-rev to wherever Max is? And most of the time it's a very glorious location of like, somewhere in Kentucky or some horrible city in Texas,
Shout out Texas.
Right.
Lubbock.
Yeah. So it's easy, to pick up the kids and non-rev and go to where Max is and, go have a nice dinner with him and then hang out until the next morning. It's like making the best of those situations. And, I think a lot of people are so terrified of non-rev travel. And like, yes, I have been absolutely screwed by it before. Like, when I have a 6 a.m. flight because it's the only one with seats, and then I get there and it's oversold by 3 because the noon flight canceled. And I'm like, okay, well, now I'm stuck wherever. But I think too, like, that's part of the adventure. Like every holiday, I non-revved with 3 kids on Thanksgiving and it was fine. I think there's a stigma around how scary it is to get stuck somewhere. It's like, I even got stuck with the kids at my parents' house on a Sunday night and they had school on Monday morning. And I was like, rats.
But they had but the thing is, those are things that, the weirdness of it all creates memories that the kids will remember. Like they don't really care about, the same things we care about the holidays. Like they think staying in a hotel anywhere is cool. Right. And and having a hot dog for Thanksgiving dinner is preferable, honestly.
Yeah. They loved it. It was weird.
I took my kids to the Rainforest Cafe on a trip for Thanksgiving, and it was like the best meal of their entire year.
Hey, you know what? The Rainforest Cafe is pretty cool.
Sometimes instead of just getting upset about the situation, you just do what you can, and make the best of it.
I think that's the best point you made there, Mackenzie. The families in aviation that are the happiest from my perspective are the people that just embrace it. They're all in on it. Part of it is, as we always say, flexibility is the key to air power. I think it's really, that's the way, in aviation families, that's the way it works too, because, plans changed. My trip changed. We were going to overnight in Ontario and you guys meet me there, but now I got reassigned. Now I'm going to be in Vegas. And okay, cool. Then, and rolling with it is so important. And that was really hard for me because my wife is a planner and she likes to have everything mapped out. And that's been a struggle for her. But as she's learned to embrace that, I think she's found a lot of freedom and personal growth, and like in even outside of our family schedule, but just as a person, like to be able to experience a lot of like, everything's going to be fine and it's going to work out, but it may not be what I thought it was going to be. And that attitude is super helpful. And especially I think too, like, if the non-flying spouse has a flexible job, that's super important as well.
That makes all the difference.
Because really at the end of the day, the aviation job typically is going to dominate. Everyone's got to kind of build their lives around it in a way. And so I remember when Lindsey was working, at a job that was not flexible and you had to request vacation 7 months out to be able to get time off and stuff, it did not work.
Yeah.
We were miserable because she would be off, but I wouldn't never know what I was doing. She could never get time off to take advantage of a lot of the perks of, hey, there's an extra seat on the airplane. Come to Aspen with us right now. And that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things, the flexibility is super key, I think, with the other spouse.
Yeah. And I think too, like, there's nothing wrong with being frustrated. I think it's great. Like if you can say, you just have to make the best of it. But that doesn't mean when Max is coming back on the line and we got a notification that his schedule had generated, we looked at it, he had the whole week of Christmas off. And it was like, this is heaven. And we made plans and this and that. And then all of a sudden it was like, we're regenerating your schedule. And we were both like, this is a sick joke. And he got a trip from like the 23rd to the 26th.
Yeah, it was when they were building my blank line. Like it came across, but it wasn't like finalized and it like auto updated. It was like, I was like, no way, look at this. This is incredible. And then all of a sudden,
putting the blank in blank line. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like we tell the kids too. Everybody makes mistakes, and in this, it's like stuff's going to happen. It's all about you're judged on how you recover from it.
Yeah,
and I think that's when these curveballs that invariably get thrown in aviation, whether it's the water heater leaking or schedule changes or whatever. Roll with it.
I
Do
think
the
it
best you
just
can.
takes a lot of patience, grace,
Keep a positive
and
attitude.
love.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't
do.
love you enough, I'd be out the back door, man. Back to my type A ways.
That's right. Well, we're excited to share our next guests. First, coming up is going to be Jackie. She's the host of the Pilot Wife podcast, a longtime pilot wife. She has a lot of great perspective, advice, and I think the coolest thing that she does is she builds community for pilot spouses. And like you mentioned, Mackenzie, that's one of the things that's really helped you is having the community and people there to support you. So we're going to talk to Jackie about all that she's up to right now.
Welcome, Jackie.
Hi. Thank you.
We appreciate you taking some time today to chat with us about the incredibly glamorous, never challenging lifestyle of being married to a
But very rewarding.
extremely, I mean, I think, the standby travel benefits alone are worth it. So today, Jackie, we just wanted to chat with you a little bit about what it's like to be married to a pilot. You were mentioning before that you've been married for 33 years to a pilot, and raised kids. So you've kind of been through all of the different phases. So we're excited to chat with you a little bit about what that's been like. Can you just kind of start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey in aviation?
Sure, absolutely. And again, thanks for having me here. It's kind of fun to share from this perspective and all these years later, certainly. So I come from a slightly different background maybe than some, in that I was in aviation first. So I went to work for a travel agency and then was hired from that travel agency to work for a regional carrier. If you ever saw the TV show Wings, that was kind of us. We were in a very small airport, couple of airlines. We all worked together, played together, worked together, partied together, did the whole thing. That whole scenario of, are you going to fly the airplane too? I've heard that a million times. After you check them in and then you run and throw the bags and then board the plane and do the flight manifest and shut the door. And anyway, so I actually met my husband my very first day of work. He was the second crew that flew in. But we didn't start dating for 3 years, and a whole nother city later, moving with the airline industry. So I already was part of aviation and the profession. And so I understood a lot of things that I didn't realize till later that everybody didn't have insight on, which is they're gone a lot and they're home a lot. A lot of people forget that piece of it.
Right.
And just will they be there when the kids are born? Will they be there for this? How come you can't commit? How come you can't RSVP them for a wedding in 2 months? Anyway, all that kind of thing. So I kind of came at it differently.
So it took a few years to actually fall in love with the pilot. Were you, did they warn you? Like, steer clear of the pilots. I remember that was a big thing when I was at the regional airline.
Of course they did. That's out there. Never date a pilot, right? Yeah, so that was my mantra,
man.
and I didn't. I dated one. Look what happened.
So what was it like when you first got married? Were there still things you were learning about?
Well, a little bit. It's funny. When we were both relocated to Nashville, Tennessee from Albuquerque, New Mexico to open as a regional for another airline, for a big airline. And at that time, I went into sales and marketing, and he went into, he was the base manager there in Nashville. So he went into management, and they were building a new terminal, and we literally, our operations, everything was housed in a little trailer, for lack of a better word. I think they're called modular something, but it was basically a trailer with 2 porta potties out back. So should we go there on the glamour of the airline industry? Anyway. But when we did that, 4 people shared an office, myself and the other sales rep, my husband, the base pilot, base manager, and then the director of training for the agents. There were 2 desks, 4 people, and we shared an office. And that's kind of how the romance started. I had a big purse with a strap, and he used to walk in and trip on it and cuss at me every single day. And pretty soon he fell in love with me. What can I say? He asked me out.
So you didn't actually break the rules, though, because he wasn't a pilot at the time. He was the base manager. So
He was doing all the check.
that was your workaround to not dating a pilot. Very clever.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So I didn't have the initial experience of him being gone all the time. I was actually the one who was gone the most because I traveled Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays to all the outer cities and did sales calls and did all that. So I was actually the one early on who was gone more. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, just drawing from my experience and probably your experience too, Max, it's one thing even when you're married and you're traveling a lot, if you don't have kids, it's not as big of a deal, I would say, right? So can you talk us through, and I think this is kind of the most complicated of the part of the relationship, obviously. Can you just talk us through what it was like to have kids with a spouse that's on the road all the time, and just go through that whole process?
Well, it's challenging for sure. There's a number of things. There's a million places we could go, not, doing all the work yourself for anywhere from 3 to 4 days. Back in the early days for him, he was flying 4-day trips. So that was long, 3 nights dealing with kids. I didn't have any family around, but I am a party starter, as they call me. And so I'm always a quick connector wherever I move. I need to have my community and people that I hang out with and do stuff with. And a lot of that, I think, started in the airline industry because, especially in the regionals, when it's just small and everybody, you basically know almost everybody on a first name basis. You work together, you play together, you party together, kind of like I mentioned earlier. That kind of becomes your clique. I'm sure it's boring for everybody else outside of the profession, but that's kind of how we rolled. Yeah. And by the time we had children, we were relocated to Phoenix, which is and even back then, it was a big hub for 2 major airlines. And so there were airline people. And in fact, one lived right in my neighborhood. She was a gate agent, but was on my cul-de-sac. So I built community, and I just really learned early on to plan my calendar, so to speak. But it was challenging. There's no doubt about it. I was lucky. My husband was home for the birth of both of our children. Knock on wood. That was a lucky thing. But I think that's...
Wait, are you knocking on wood because you're going to have another child?
No, knock on wood. No, that's a good question. Bite your tongue. No, I'm a new grandmother. So there you go.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
She's passed the torch.
Yeah. You were around for all your kids' births, right?
Yeah, I made it.
I was too. That's good.
Yeah. I haven't...
That's a good percentage.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, though, I mean, especially the airlines, though, unless it happens like right now, they're pretty good about.
Yes.
Corporate can be a little different. I remember like during that time for one of my kids was over the summer, and I was in Europe for like 6 weeks, and I'm like, well, I hope this doesn't go down. It's going to take me a minute to get home.
Well, Jackie, you hit on an important topic, and this is one piece of advice that I try and give to any pilot when they're looking at another spouse. Is it's key for the non-traveling spouse, I think, to be pretty independent and I think be able to kind of generate their own social universe, I guess, or kind of be the party starter, like you mentioned. Do you ever talk to other pilot wives or pilot spouses about that, or the people that struggle if they're introverted? What do you have any thoughts on some of those character traits?
I do. All the time. In fact, that's kind of why I launched the Pilot Wife podcast. It started out of that with people asking questions in a Facebook group and then private messaging me. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to launch a podcast. This is great. We can cover these topics. I mean, everybody's individual, and I don't know that we can change our personality type. And I know you guys do the Enneagram, so we got that. Yeah. We got that in common. But I don't think that you can change so much of that. But ultimately, you have to decide, it is a choice. Am I going to be happy or not? So I don't know how... I'm an introverted extrovert, if that makes any sense. Like, I get all of my energy mostly from my downtime, but I like to be out and about, and I like to have a full calendar and know what I'm doing. So I think you ultimately just have to ask yourself what's lacking in my life if you're looking for more social engagement. And really today, with Facebook and the Pilot Wife groups and the sense of community of that. I mean, I'm planning, the Phoenix Open is coming up as we're recording this, and I'm planning a Pilot Wife outing at the Phoenix Open. And it's not restricted just to my airline. So let your wives know. Anyway, just for fun and community, it's a day we can go out. People can show up whenever they want. You can meet different people, make connections. And I know when I had little kids, I joined a parenting class. I didn't even know that existed. I found it in the little local newspaper. I don't know that you can do that anymore. It was the Ahwatukee News. Lived down there, but I know that paper still is out. Joined a play group, met a whole group of moms. We started a play group. I'm still friends with some of those women today, and my kids are still connected through social media with some of them. And we moved to California for 15 years and did a lot of different stuff along the way. So it really depends on you and what you're looking for. But that community, that parenting community and that group of other children, we ended up traveling together. We did fun boat rides out at Canyon Lake and different things. This was all when I lived in Phoenix the first time. We did a lot of stuff. We kept the kids busy, and they kept busy too, because even though their spouses weren't traveling at night, they still were working during the day. And some of them, had sales rep type husbands. Some of them had husbands who traveled. So I think a lot of it's just really deciding what matters most to you and how willing you are to push yourself out there just a little bit to make community.
Yeah, I think the hardest transition for somebody is if they have kids and they have good family support, like we're in their hometown, and then say they move to a major airline and say, okay, we're going to move to wherever, to the hub or to a base, which is a smart move, I think, because to avoid commuting, right?
Yes.
And then they end up there, and the spouse goes to work and is flying, and the one who's staying with the kids is all by themselves. And at least now, like through your community that you started and others, it's a whole lot easier, I think, than when you were in that position to find groups of people, meetup groups and all this with the advent of social media and everybody using the internet instead of the newspaper. And so I think that people just have to, like, as part of their plan to move is to be like, okay, we're going to move, and you have to step a little bit outside your comfort zone too to make friends. Because, one of the toughest things could be during the summer being stuck at home with, like, the kids and nowhere to go, like no one to go see or nothing to do, like no plan. And that would be really, really tough. And even during school, when you're just home by yourself, that would be tough too. But I can imagine how that would wear the spouse down and then drag everything down, where it's like, you got to start off, I think, on the right foot. And like you said, have that sense of community, make some friends, put yourself out there a little bit. It's a little bit uncomfortable for a lot of people, but I think would you say that that's kind of like the key to navigating if you go somewhere and you don't have a built-in support network already?
Oh, absolutely. We relocated back to Scottsdale 5 years ago, and I had already joined Facebook groups in the Phoenix area for networking and all types of stuff before I even left California. I was like ready to go. So there's so much that you can do ahead of time, and people are welcoming. And I think the biggest thing to remember, if you're feeling a certain way, if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling unengaged, if you're feeling overwhelmed, there's a whole bunch of other people out there who are feeling the exact same way. And everybody's kind of holding back, waiting for somebody else. Just make the first move. Put it out there in a Facebook group. Do whatever. Go to I don't even know what they are anymore. They were Gymboree classes when my kids were little. I don't even know if that's still around. But go to some kid activity. We were just back in North Carolina with my granddaughter and went to a really cool indoor trampoline thing. Just chatting it up with other parents, because other parents, regardless of the aviation community, other parents feel the exact same way. And I remember back when my kids were little, meeting so many moms whose husband, they relocated every 3 years with a corporate job, right? They were climbing that corporate ladder.
Right.
And I remember thinking to myself, I wouldn't trade places with that person for anything.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that. We actually went to an indoor trampoline place, and my wife met another woman whose husband was a Southwest pilot, and we were both there too. And it was like 10 o'clock on like a Tuesday, and I think they looked like, what are these two guys doing here? Shouldn't you be at work?
That's interesting, because we always bring up, and everybody thinks, oh, the pilots are always gone and this and that, and it's kind of like this negative connotation. But can you talk a little bit about the positive part about us being home, with not actually having to go to work more days than we do and usually and that
I
kind
thought
of
you were
thing?
going to say the positive part was the gone, but okay, I can go there with you.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
I
kidding.
guess that depends, right?
That really is it. I look back on what's known as the lost decade, and a lot of people will know what that is. Some of the new people won't, but that was the time right after 9/11 when there was no movement. The only way you could change, almost the only way that you could move up the seniority list was retirements, because there was this huge
Right.
decade of no movement for the most part. I mean, a little bit here and there. And I look back on that and I think, wow, it was great in so many ways, because my husband literally flew either Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That was it. Month after month, that's what he did. He was senior enough to hold that. Now I look back and think, wow, well, he could have, he missed out at that point on, transitioning to a wide body airplane, and that would have been more money. Well, it also would have been more time gone for the most part, like a length of time gone. So I think you have to look at the good and all of that. I look back on that time frame and think that was really magical, because we could RSVP for a wedding 6 months out because we knew that he could hold that with seniority. So there's a lot of different things career-wise. I'm not trying to advise from a pilot career perspective, but there's a lot of things that you can look at that you do have control over, depending on your willingness to quote unquote sacrifice in certain areas. So the time that's home, I mean, my kids have no idea what it's like to grow up in a traditional working household. I quit my job in aviation to stay home when we had kids, when the first one was born, started my own business, but even that was my own gig and I could totally control my schedule. And, a funny thing, I remember once my daughter in a carpool, somebody said, well, what do your parents do? And my daughter was like, well, my dad flies around and stays in hotel rooms, and my mom reads a lot of fitness and recipe books. I mean, that was just like her perspective of what her parents did as a career. And it was funny. But he used to take them to lunch individually once a week. So he'd go pick them up at elementary school, mostly in elementary school. That's when they still like you, they don't mind being seen with
Right.
their parents.
Mhm.
And, he just had that, he was able to build that kind of relationship. And so those are some of the good things that I think are so golden, that it's hard to think of that when you're dealing with a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old. I get that. Like, you're just thinking, how do I, get out of this treadmill of constantly changing diapers and feeding snacks and cleaning up and that whole thing. But there are so many great positive things to look forward to. And I'm so grateful. My children have a fantastic relationship with their dad. And I really feel like a lot of it was the amount of time that he was home and totally not distracted. So that's another thing. I have a number of friends who are married to attorneys for whatever reason. I don't know why that I have this group of friends, but I would watch them Sunday at 2, be on the laptop, planning for the deposition the next day, or constantly distracted by the case that was going on or the workload or that kind of thing. So yeah, they were home at night, but they weren't present. And that's a totally different thing. And that's what I used to say, man. And you guys can relate, unless there was an incident or something that you have to write up or do, once you park that baby and get off that airplane, you're done until you check in again. You don't have to. Yes, I know they're studying for recurrent and upgrade. I mean, I know that there are other things. I'm certainly not trying to make light of what your job and your responsibilities are, but I think you guys understand what I mean with that. I don't remember
Of course, yeah.
him ever. I mean, he'd occasionally look at the weather and think, oh, geez, I have to pack warmer clothes because it's going to be snowy, for the next upcoming trip.
Yeah. That's what I've tried to explain to some people too. It's about not necessarily about quantity, but quality. And I was going to mention the same thing when before COVID and we could go to school, and I would bring my kids lunch and sit at the lunch table with them every week, each kid when they were in elementary school and they still thought I was cool. And the same thing. And then I'd be there to pick them up when they get home from school, and then they do their homework and you're still there. It's about like dad's there and actually there. And that's the beauty of a corporate versus airline job too that I love, is that when you set the brake and you get off that airplane, there's literally, you have zero responsibility except for to like wash your uniform so it's clean
Right.
for the next trip. That's about
Shave,
it.
Yeah.
Where with business aviation, it can be a little bit different because there's a lot of extraneous duties and the owner calling you and this and that. And I was kind of in that, but even still, it's not it's not like that's stressful, or you're like working on a case, and you're like, when you're there. Like, and I know Dylan's the same way. He takes his kids to the bus, picks them up from the bus, and does a lot of the stuff that a normal, even 9 to 5, or some people that work more than that. I think this is a better deal.
Yeah, but I think, we've painted a pretty rosy picture for the last 10 minutes. I do think we should also recognize some of the challenges too, Jackie, and I'm sure we've all had to experience it. And I would say probably one of the main drawbacks that listeners should be aware of, especially folks that aren't in aviation, is there's a lot of weekends and holidays, or there's the potential for that, to be gone, missing kids' birthdays, missing anniversaries, and that kind of stuff. Can you just talk a little bit about having to go through that, and then maybe ways that you guys were able to find to kind of overcome some of those times when the other spouse wasn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that we learned to do early on is celebrate the event and not the date. And that's not always, depending on how, I didn't grow up that way for sure. I grew up celebrating the date and learned to celebrate the event. And again, part of that, I was in the profession and worked holidays myself and missed going home at times for Christmas and different things along those lines. But I think that a lot of it does start with mindset. It really starts with how you're going to view it and what you're going to do for it. I remember the first year, the first Christmas of my son, he was 3 months and my husband wasn't home for Christmas. But interestingly, he flew through Phoenix, which was where we were living at the time, on Christmas Eve. We met him at the airport. This was pre 9/11 when you could just go through. We met him at the airport. I have pictures of, my son in the cockpit with him at 3 months old, just fun stuff like that. Can't quite do that same thing today. But I remember going to a neighbor's, for Christmas dinner. That's kind of what we did. And then I mentioned being a party starter. One year, like 2 or 3 years into my kids were really small, I reached out to my whole cul-de-sac. I lived in a 13-house cul-de-sac, and I just reached out to everybody, because especially back then in Phoenix, nobody was from Phoenix, and said, hey, I don't know if you guys have plans, if you have family, if you're traveling, but I'm going to host Christmas dinner at my house, and anybody's welcome. If you have people in, your kids, whatever. And we had like 13 people that day. And every year after that, we started doing a big cul-de-sac party. We even found a bouncy castle, jumping castle company that would bring and set it up on Christmas Eve and come pick it up the day after Christmas, because they didn't want to be gone Christmas Day. Didn't charge us anything extra. I mean, we just learned to make do with what there was. And my kids kind of, as they got older, they didn't understand always what Christmas Day was. So if it was on the 23rd and they weren't around other people, they didn't understand it. But as they got older, they kind of grew to love it, because they knew they were going to have like a week-long event of whatever it was. They were going to have a birthday party twice, or go out to dinner, whatever it was. So we just learned.
You just got to make the best of it. And you're right. It's all about your attitude and your perspective. Yeah. And I had to work on Thanksgiving and Christmas this year. And I came through Phoenix, like you said, on Thanksgiving, and I was operating one more leg to Palm Springs. And I was like, why don't you guys just come with? And they're like, oh. So everyone showed up at the airport. They got on my flight. We flew to Palm Springs. We stayed at the hotel. And, they don't care if it's turkey or a freaking hot dog. And we sat by the pool in Palm Springs and had Thanksgiving dinner. And it was good. And the kids, they love that's more fun than a traditional sitting down with their family. Like, they get to go stay in a hotel, which is just like a magical experience still, and all this. And so, yeah, you're right. You just got to, do the best that you can with the cards that you're dealt at that certain seniority level.
It is. And
know that things will get better.
It's the big
ultimately.
F word in aviation, and that's flexibility, and learning to make that flexibility fun. It's like you said, how great is that? My kids are older now, but they will tell you every single trip we ever took, whether it was travel hockey or whatever it was, they can tell you about the pool. If there's a pool, you're golden. You're golden.
Yeah, exactly.
That is such a key point. It's one of the mottos on our show is flexibility is the key to air power. And a lot of times we think about that from a pilot perspective, but I think actually from a family perspective too, it is so important. We mentioned qualities that people possess that I think help them. Being independent, being able to kind of reach out socially, get outside of your comfort zone, and then be flexible. I think those are things that if you have the ability to do all of that, you will enjoy your life in aviation so much more. I know it's tough even for my wife sometimes, who likes to plan and kind of have things scheduled out. And as a corporate pilot, sometimes I'll get really cool opportunities to bring her along or my family along. And it usually happens like the day before. We find out, hey, there's an extra seat, come along. And that was kind of a challenge for her at first to be able to roll with it. But as she's become more comfortable doing that, we've been able to enjoy some really cool perks. So I think the more flexible you are, just in general, the more successful you'll be.
Well, I think it's letting go of some of the traditional conditioning that we've had of how life is supposed to be, how holidays are supposed to be, who and how we're supposed to spend those different things. One of my mottos became, especially when I started myself in aviation, was say yes as much as possible and figure it out later, because the experience of that will be so amazing. And I believe that travel is the key to the world. If you can travel and you have traveled, you own the world. And there's no better education you can give your children. There's no better way to teach them about Washington, D.C. and everything that's gone on there. There's no better way to teach them about the Eiffel Tower. There's no better way to enrich their lives and their experience and expand their horizons and open up their minds to all the opportunities that exist in all the world with different things than travel. So yeah, say yes as much as possible, be flexible, figure it out. Oh, well, so they missed 2 days of school. You pulled them out. What the heck? They got a much better education than, sitting in the classroom, wasting a lot of time. I'm not dissing on school.
Right.
I'm just saying that's such a great experience.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to learn.
Yep. Any other maybe, I don't want to say downsides, but any potential challenges, other challenges that you typically share with people in your community to kind of be aware of, or like, hey, this could be a struggle to get through?
Be prepared, right? Have a checklist. That's so aviation oriented, but what can I say? It really is true. I think that being prepared for so many things. Crap's going to happen when they're on the road. My very first night as a pilot wife, and my husband had gone back on the line. His first trip back, my first night in our house by ourselves, a tree fell on the house. Like there was a big storm, a tree fell on the house, knocked all the power out. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any of that kind of stuff. I didn't even know what to do, but I winged it. I kind of thought, well, I'm a grown adult. What would I do if I lived by myself, right? I don't need permission. So be prepared. Know the electrician, have the number, know a handyman, know a pool guy if you own a pool. Have resources and be prepared ahead of time. Have a bit of a backup plan for who you can call when there is an emergency, because there are going to be. My son at age 11 and a half months broke his arm while my husband was on a trip, and it happened at night, late. I had to get him to the emergency room, had to do all that kind of stuff. It's stressful at the time. Actually, in some ways, it's stressful more thinking about what might happen than when it really happens. You do go into autopilot. Again, I don't mean to pull all these aviation expressions, but what can I tell you? You will figure things out. And as a spouse myself, the empowerment that has given me, the independence, the ability to know that I can handle life, I can handle stuff, and I can be a really good equal partner. Like that was important to me too. I know he has a job to do when he's on the road. I want him to be safe. I want the passengers to be safe. I don't want his mind distracted thinking, oh my gosh, what if my wife can't handle this or whatever? I want him to know that he can relax, do his job, enjoy his life too, and not worry about what's going on at home. Because I know you guys worry about what's going on at home. I know you think about us. I know you think about the things that you're missing and is everybody okay and all of that. I just want to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can to keep that space comfortable for everyone. So have a plan, know that stuff's going to happen, and you can deal with it because you're amazing. You deal with so many other things. Wives and spouses and partners, I'm talking to you.
Yeah, it's a mindset thing once again. The other thing, but there's some interesting, if you think about that, some of the things that I did, there's some good tools out there that can help soften the blow, I guess you could say, like with your house stuff, right? If you live in a house that's between 10 and 15 years old, that's when everything like the water heater, the AC, everything starts to break. So at that point, spend the $400 or $500 a year and get a home warranty and be like, hey, if something breaks while I'm gone, here's one number to call. And then they'll schedule the appropriate trade to come out and this and that. And now, of course, a home warranty is not for everything, but for a lot of those things that just go wrong that are obnoxious and you're like, oh, who should I call? What do I do? Just call that 1-800 number or go online even and just do it. And then they call you and it's done. And so there's some of those things you can do kind of proactively to, as if you're going to be gone, stuff that you would normally handle that you can make it a little bit easier.
AAA also.
Stuff only breaks when you're on the road. That's just the way. Yeah, AAA, exactly. Yeah. A flat tire with AAA, because that stuff only happens when you're on the road.
Battery,
literally, like 90% of the time.
It's very true. But I think that is, like you mentioned, it is liberating when the spouse at home can figure out that, hey, I can do this myself, and that is encouraging. And kind of tying into that, we've mentioned all of these sacrifices and maybe lifestyle changes and mindset changes that the family has to make because they're an aviation family. And I think that it's very easy to take that identity on, oh, we're an aviation family. Oh, my husband or my wife is a pilot. And so that's kind of all that's going on. And I think aviation spouses sometimes maybe because they have to make those sacrifices, maybe they lose part of their identity, right? And their individualism. Can you talk about is there a struggle sometimes for pilot spouses to be like, I want my own thing. I want to have my own business. I want to have my own identity. Do you find that folks struggle with that?
Yes. In fact, I just did a podcast on that just a week or so ago on that very thing, maintaining your identity when it's all about the pilot.
Right.
And again, I personally love aviation. I feel like I owned aviation before I became a pilot wife because I started in the industry before I even knew my pilot existed, right? So I feel like I own aviation. I can tell you to this day, I'm still a window seat gal. I don't care how short the flight is. I want to sit by the window. I want to watch the takeoff, the landing. I still consider it PFM, pure magic. Pure flexible magic.
Right.
I just think it's magical. There's nothing more magical to me than flight. So I do personally have a bit of a fascination with all that myself still to this day. But I also, like I mentioned, I started a business when my son was 2 years old and he's 29 now. So I've had my own business for a long time. And that's been a huge part of my identity too. In fact, it's kind of funny. I never quote unquote identified as a pilot wife until social media came along. Like it just wasn't a thing. And then there were all these groups and everything, although it's always been a huge part of my life, one that I love. And my daughter too. I mean, it's kind of funny. She loves being part of an aviation family. She just thinks it's so cool. My son is like, yeah, whatever. But my daughter just totally loves it. But I think it's all in how you handle it, even with people. In conversation, like one of the things I always like to ask people when they would keep wanting to talk about the pilot thing or whatever, I would just say, what is it that fascinates you? What is it that fascinates you with that? And just see where that conversation lends itself or leads itself more than anything. It's interesting how just asking people questions about, what they find intriguing about that or sharing your own perspectives of it can really lead you down a different path. And then I think, again, it's just being really strong and solid. Yes, that's a big part of your life. And because let's face it, it almost doesn't matter what the profession is. Your spouse's career will be a big part of your life too, because life and business and career intersect all the time, no matter what it is. There just often does tend to be more of a fascination with aviation than I think other professions. And not dissing accountants, but maybe you don't get that many questions when you say you're married to an accountant or something like that. But aviation is interesting and people want to know about travel.
Early April.
What?
Right.
The only question I think would be, how do you handle April 1st to the 15th? It's so stressful.
Right.
Oh, man. So, when you've talked to other successful pilot spouses that have done their own businesses, it sounds like kind of being your own boss, working from home kind of is probably a pretty general theme that you see a lot of folks do. Would you say that's
a lot
accurate?
of that, a lot of real estate, Yeah. And a lot of medical professionals, too. There are a lot of pilot spouses who are doctors, dentists, eye doctors. I've run into a lot of them.
Yeah, it seems like that, just from what I've observed, and I don't think this has to do just with aviation, but just when you have that family with the young kids, it's that maybe until they get to about 8 or 9, 10 years old, it's tough for both spouses to work full time, it seems like. But then there becomes an opportunity kind of as the children get older.
Especially once everyone gets in school.
Yeah. And then maybe the pilot has a little bit more seniority and they can hold a better schedule.
Yeah. It's always the tragedy of seniority, I've always said, because I fly with all these people that have been, at the company for 30 years. And they're like, yeah, no, I work on the weekends because I like to go to dinner on Tuesdays and golf on Wednesdays when nobody's there. And then everybody that's junior that has young kids and they have baseball games and everything on the weekends and they can't hold it, because everybody else is just like, God, I wish it would like start the other way where you start with the most seniority and you end with the least because it matters less at the end.
Well, it's kind of funny. Once we
part of the game.
Empty nesters, my husband went back to flying weekends, not holidays, but he did kind of go back to flying weekends because the same thing. We really enjoyed traveling during the week. We really enjoyed doing all those things where it wasn't crowded, where, all that type stuff. So it is interesting how you shift, because I remember once him sitting there saying, God, the schedule is just terrible. Like if I bid for weekends off, I'm going to get this, whatever. And I remember saying, so fly the weekends. It doesn't matter anymore. We don't have kids even at home, right? They're gone to college, whatever. I'm home all the time because I work from home. Do what fits the schedule. And that was speaking of liberating, that was liberating too.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have this, my wife and I sometimes have this saying where we'll go and we'll ski and then we'll be at the opera bar sitting outside on a beautiful day. And I'll just look over with my cocktail and say, we call this Tuesday, which is just always kind of funny because it's so out of the norm for everybody else.
Jackie, one other thing I wanted to touch on, and this is especially for someone that's listening to this show that really doesn't know anything about aviation, but you've got a spouse, especially at the airlines. The schedules come out monthly, right? And there's a bidding process and, there's different ways to do it, but essentially it's the same thing. Sometime in the month before they're going to bid, and then, maybe a week, 2 weeks before the following month, they're going to get their schedule. Can you just talk a little bit about, was that tough to adapt to? Do you have any tips to any spouses, when you're kind of waiting and then all of a sudden you just get the schedule for the month and kind of dealing with that?
Well, it can be very disappointing. There's no doubt about it. Speaking of the downsides and the disappointments and all of that. So that's just a reality of it. And it is challenging, I guess. And it's kind of funny. I even worked in scheduling for a while and route managed a lot of different things. And I've never quite figured out, I guess you just have to be, I guess the airline industry just has to be willing to change on a dime when routes aren't working out, or, aircraft, like, let's not even get into the Max or whatever, not Max, UMax, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, we won't even get into all that when, things really go bad within the industry. But I mean, it really is just a part of it. And I think a lot of that comes back to having a backup plan. Like I learned to stop being mad about having to, bring a good friend to the wedding of somebody because my spouse was flying or whatever it was. I adapted myself to know that I could have a good time no matter what. And sometimes it's golden and you get that schedule and you're like, dang, I got everything I bid for. I don't even know how that happened. I got everything I bid for. And then sometimes it comes in and you got nothing that you bid for. And you're thinking, how? It's the same seniority. Like what happened this month versus last month? It's just a reality of it. The nice thing in the airline industry, this is not other like corporate or any of that, but in the airline industry, you often have the opportunity, of course, to drop trips, trade trips, play with your schedule as best you can. That doesn't always work either. And that is just one of the realities of it. But we were pretty lucky. We've been pretty lucky over the course of time. There were definitely things he didn't get to go to. Sometimes I wonder if he really didn't try that hard because he didn't really want to
go. Selective wedding. Yeah.
What? No, sorry, I didn't get it off. I don't know. I don't know why I didn't get that day off. Anyway, but it's just rolling with it. And I don't mean to make it sound like you just have to suck it up and accept it, but that is kind of how life is. It's 50-50. It's never going to be 100% anything that you want it to be. And again, that's regardless of the profession, regardless of the job within the profession or any of that. That's just the way life rolls. But again, I think I know for a fact, looking back now over 33 years and raising kids and all of that, my kids don't remember the bad times. They really, truly don't. We laugh about certain things, and sometimes I'll bring something up and they're like, oh, yeah, I don't really remember that. They remember all the good stuff, the travel, the lunches with dad, him taking them to school, him volunteering in their classroom. It was like there was one dad that volunteered in the classroom, and that was my husband, and all the rest were moms, and they remember that kind of stuff. Those are the things that they really remember. And if you allow yourself to feel that way too, as a spouse or partner, you can look back and feel that way too. I'm not trying to lessen the pain when you're going through it. I get it. I've been there. I've been mad, I've been flat out mad, but that doesn't do any good. It doesn't change it.
Yeah. Now, I got a question for both of you, and I think this was a struggle when we talk about the monthly bidding stuff. I don't know what the right philosophy is. I know for Lindsey and I, for a while, we would just not make plans for the next month until the bid came out. And it was only like maybe 10 days before the next month. And I don't know that was the right way to do it, but it was just like it was just this feeling of always being in limbo. And I think we got so tired of canceling and changing plans that we waited, and then I don't know that was better either. But have you found a good balance of how to handle that, Jackie or Max? I don't know. Have you guys?
Well, we definitely operate that way in terms of making our own plans or planning a child's birthday party, for instance, or something like that. We would have the tentative plan, this is what we'd like to do. And if you're booking something, like if you have to book a facility, for a wedding or something really big, that's almost impossible.
Right.
But for a kid's birthday party or something, sometimes they work well with you, sometimes they don't. But we did a lot of pool parties, honestly, because kids tend to enjoy that more, living in the Phoenix area, of course, and it depends on where you live and what you have. But that we did that a lot. We just waited and then would finalize the date once we had the schedule and we knew it was firm. And there's occasionally that time when they don't get home the day they're supposed to because there's a delay and, there's weather. They get stranded sometimes overnight in cities and stuff too. You both can relate to that. And you just, again, you do the best you can. Those are fewer and farther between, though. I can tell you that's the exception rather than the rule for sure.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before on the podcast, where the biggest difference for me from being a corporate pilot to being an airline pilot is I went from planning my life around somebody else's schedule to then planning my work or making my work around the schedule I had planned. So I'm probably a little bit too optimistic sometimes when I plan stuff before I have my schedule. But even then, and even if my schedule comes out and it's, stepping on something that I already planned, I don't give up there. Like I just say, no, we'll figure it out and we'll trade or I'll drop and I set up like alerts. And that's part of the thing too, that I think, I don't know if this is how unique this is, but I trained my wife on how to use our computer system at the airline because I'm flying or I'm doing stuff. And so I have her on like text alerts when trips, come up or we need the net zero to come to 1 so I can trip trade with something that's in the system already. And so she's on it. And like, she works from home, so she has a computer screen up and she'll bang out that trade. And then all of a sudden, boom, my weekend plan that I had that got squashed is back on. And I just don't change it.
Yeah.
And so, I tend to plan and then figure it out. And which, not to say that works all the time because it certainly does not, but it works a lot more than I thought it would.
We do the same. Absolutely. I've booked a lot of jump seats. Done a lot of that type of stuff because it's a team effort, right?
Yeah, it's super helpful because you'll land and also you turn your phone and like, boom, you get the text alert and you're like, dude,
Merry Christmas.
That was like a 2-minute thing. You had to be on it and you missed it. And so I was like, look, you got to figure out how to do this.
Because... Yeah. And then you land every once in a while like, why do I have my mother-in-law's birthday off now?
Yeah. All of a sudden it's this updating schedule on your app and you're like, wait a minute, what just happened? That also has
The
happened.
good and the bad.
Surprise.
Oh, that mother lumber. That's funny.
Oh, man. Anything else before we move on, Jackie, you want to touch on scheduling or any tricks or tips you've learned along the way?
No, that probably covers it with scheduling. I mean, it's, you do the best you
Okay.
can.
Well, Jackie, we'll give you the floor for a minute. If you have any final advice you want to give any of our listeners here, considering the exciting but challenging life of marrying a pilot.
I feel like Jackie's like the pilot spouse den mother. Like,
Yes, I know.
Bestow your wisdom upon the aspiring. Go
I'm
ahead.
the den mother and the cheerleader. I cannot imagine. I wouldn't trade my life for anything, any of it, really and truly, because, the tough times make you and the fun times are just fun. And there are a lot more fun times than there are challenging times. But the ability to have the life that we have, to experience the travel in whatever capacity, to raise your children in the way that aviation can allow you to. And again, I'm speaking more to airline. I realize that, aviation is broad, but this is from an airline spouse perspective. It's just been amazing. We talk about the time gone, but there's a lot more time home, honestly, in most cases, especially as a little seniority builds. There's more time home. But it's just been magical. To me, it just still is very, very magical from so many aspects of it. And so I would, the biggest thing I would do is make a list of the pros. If you're really challenged or if you're considering it or wondering if it's right for you, make a list of the pros and cons, really and truly. And I think that if you will allow your imagination to take you to places that you might not go otherwise, not just travel, but the time, the flexibility on all aspects of it, you will find that it really is a lifestyle that's unlike any other. And people can't relate to it. And to me, that's part of the magic. Like, I feel like I'm part of a special little clique of magic. Again, I keep using that word, but that's what it's always felt like to me. It really has. And even And again, that's not to gloss over the downside, but there's a downside in every profession. I look around at other family members and close friends and again, kind of come up with, I wouldn't trade that for, a 2-day delay where he didn't get home. I wouldn't trade what they're doing for what I've experienced or any of that for anything. It's just, it really can be the best when you go into it with an attitude of allowing what's so different about it to make it something so special about it.
That is well said. Let's leave everyone on a high note, Jackie. You have any good stories of being able to enjoy the perks of being a pilot wife and any cool experiences that have happened during your guys' journey?
A couple of the funnest things for me, I have my own business, as I mentioned, and I've traveled a lot through that. And I can think of magical times when I would be flying through an airport and my husband would be passing through it too. And we'd meet at a gate and kiss and have this fantastic embrace and leave everybody else wondering. And then we'd both go on to our next gate and leave everybody else wondering, like, what the heck was that? Who was that person?
That's pretty funny.
It was. And I would always make it very dramatic because, as you can probably tell, I'm a little bit of a performer. That's the 3 on the Enneagram. But I loved making that, just like having people watch and wonder. And then I always wondered what the people getting on the airplane that he was, we didn't do it at his gate. So he kept on going to his gate because he was in, full on uniform and everything else. And then I remember once I was in Atlanta for a business trip and I was spending the night at the Atlanta, my business trip wrapped up, but it didn't get me out in time. I was spending the night at the Atlanta airport, headed to Nashville where our daughter lived. Actually, she didn't live there yet. She was flying in. And my husband happened to have an Atlanta layover and it was at the airport. So I got to the airport got to the hotel. He was staying at the hotel airport and he was like, just, that's perfect. You can come stay in my room, whatever. We'll have breakfast the next morning. We'll go on our separate ways. And so we did. But I remember being in the lobby of the airport and just hanging out there with all my bags. And then this crew shows up and the pilot checks in and I go off to his room with him. And I remember thinking that time too, I wonder what everybody's thinking. Because I never checked in. I just waited in the lobby had a glass of wine, just sitting there, just being decadent and having fun and thinking, when else could I have done this? This would have never worked out in any other profession. So that's a funny story too. A fun story.
That's funny.
I love it. Messing with people.
I know, me too. That's
good.
one of my favorite pastimes. So.
What is going on here? Oh, that's great. Well, Jackie, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us, share a little bit about your experience and some wisdom and tips. And if you want to hear more from Jackie, you can visit pilotwifepodcast.com. Check out your podcast. You've got all sorts of different folks that join you, and you guys are covering a wide range of topics. So I recommend it to any aviation family. If you're a current aviation spouse or a potential aviation spouse, a great lot of resources that you cover there. So thanks for what you do for the aviation community. We certainly appreciate it. And we look forward to maybe speaking with you again sometime and learning more about, maybe you'll have a good, some advice for the pilot husbands that are on the road on how to treat their wives better.
Oh, and I do. I'm going to have to get you guys on the show.
Yeah. That's right. We'll look forward to that. All right, Jackie. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks,
you.
Jackie.
Well, a lot of great advice from Jackie in that segment. You can check out more of what she's up to at pilotwifepodcast.com. How about some more good advice for our listeners, Max? These are the non-spouses, the actual pilots listening. You got to protect that certificate. You got a family on the line if you're listening to this. They are depending on your income. And unfortunately, your ability to make that income comes down to a flimsy white, awkwardly shaped piece of paper that I don't even really know how to fold and store.
No, I washed mine recently.
Yeah, I know.
It still has its integrity.
We're of course talking about the FAA medical that we all need to bring home the bacon. You got to protect that. What happens if you close your fingers in the car door or your kid shoots you in the eye with a Nerf gun?
A gal that I flew with had the Uber driver hit the button to close the lift gate when she was getting, she had dropped her car off her tires and was getting dropped off the airport. And she turned to put her bag down, and the Uber driver thought she had all her bags and started shutting it. And she turned back to get her bag and hit her square in the eye, in the eyeball. And she was out for 6 months.
Yeah.
Just like that. So you never know.
Absolutely. There's only one way to protect yourself, and that is with loss of medical license insurance from our friends at Harvey Watt. They are the largest provider of that service to professional pilots in the airlines, business aviation, cargo, charter, everywhere in between. HarveyWatt.com for more information on all of the services they provide to professional pilots. Coming up next, this was a really fun conversation, Max, with Ryan and Yllithia. Fun fact, Yllithia was my MEI instructor. Did you know that?
I didn't.
Yeah.
How about that?
And I passed the course with flying colors. Shout out. Thanks, Yllithia. Great conversation with them. Yllithia, full-time pilot for a major airline, and Ryan stays at home with the kiddos. We're going to learn a lot about what it's like when mom is on the road full-time.
All right. We have a friend from college again on the show. Her name is Yllithia, and her husband, Ryan. Yllithia flies for a major airline, and it's the next in our series of discussions with aviation couples.
Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, thank you. Nice to be here.
So we've been discussing on this episode the lifestyle of being married to a pilot, and trying to break things down for somebody that maybe doesn't know anything about aviation, but they're thinking about getting into a relationship with a pilot. And so we wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about your journey, your perspective. You guys have kids, mom's on the road sometimes. So I think there's a lot that we can discuss. I want to start with you, Ryan. What was it like to marry someone that's in aviation? Did you know anything about aviation? Did you have to learn a lot? Was there a steep learning curve? What was your experience?
The part I knew about aviation was the joys of free travel, because I had that since I was a lot younger through a friend's mom. She put me on her benefits, and so I'd been flying standby. I knew how that worked. And that was probably enough to let me know I wanted to be in the industry, as far as marrying into it.
So what was the learning curve like to marry someone in aviation? All these terms you don't understand, bidding, schedules. Can you talk a little bit about how long it took you to figure out what that was like?
Actually, I still haven't figured that out. I just let the mystery of that be a mystery. She's on top of that. It's too hard. The acronyms are endless. To hear her speak to her fellow colleagues in airplane speak is, I can't imagine. It's like hearing aliens talk. It doesn't make any sense.
He actually makes fun of me all the time. He'll turn to me and say, "Roger, Niner, Niner." That's pretty much all he knows. Yeah.
That'll get you by in most situations anyway. So
Ryan, you said you had been introduced to non-rev travel. So were you just kind of like hanging out at the airport because you're like, I love non-revving, and just kind of looking around for a potential a mate? Was that your strategy, or how did that work?
No, it wasn't like that. It was one of my better friends. His mom had been a flight attendant for Delta since the 70s. So she was perpetually single. She had coffee cups that said things like, "Marry me, fly free." And I was over at his house and saw that. And I was like, "What's that about?" And she said, "You want to be my domestic partner," which, she was like 65 and I was 20. And that basically meant I was with her. Back then, we had to prove that we lived together and stuff, but that was easy to fudge back then. And so I had those benefits, and I did end up just hanging out in airports with her son, who also had benefits. And we'd just be looking at the board thinking, that flight's next to Jamaica. That might be fun.
But that's not how we met, if that's your question. I wasn't strolling through and he's like, "Hey,
No.
want a date?"
I'm looking for a new domestic partner.
Yeah. I worked with his old girlfriend, and she invited me to a party, and that's how we were acquainted. So once they broke up, maybe a year later is when we reconnected. And
She was a flight attendant, so Yllithia was an upgrade in the aviation parlance.
did you, when you first met, you're like, I don't mean to be forward, but what's your domestic partner situation right now?
yes.
I really
What's
can't
your
afford a
domestic
lapse
partner
in
situation?
benefits at this stage of my life. So
Can I review your airline's travel policy?
yeah, what's the health insurance situation like too?
That's funny.
All joking aside, we did actually elope for the flight benefits.
Are you serious?
Oh.
Yeah, we did.
That's awesome.
Now, for folks listening, standby travel isn't all. Yeah, I don't know. Especially once you have kids, it becomes a little bit more challenging, right? I mean, or has it just been incredible, Ryan? This whole run, have you just been flying to Paris first class every week, or what's been going on?
I mean, I used to be downright poor attitude if I didn't get first class, because that lady who put me on her domestic partnership had like a 1972 hire date. So I was always the first one on. If there was a seat in first, I was beating out old geezers and children and everybody. But you're right, though. It's getting stranded back then was one thing. It didn't. You just sat at a different gate until something opened up. But with children, it's a non-starter almost if it doesn't look like a slam dunk, because that is not fun.
Yes. Yeah. Lindsey, do you have any fun memories of standby travel?
Of course, I've been running through it in my head as we've been talking about this, but I was so excited in my early or mid-20s when I got on Dylan's flight benefits, and he worked for a commuter airline back then. And so I thought I could just do whatever I wanted. And then I got stranded, and I think in Miami, and I had to rent a car in Miami to drive up to Jacksonville and pick up my car and finish the drive to Charleston, South Carolina, and because I had to be back the next day. And I think that's when I threw in the towel on non-rev at the ripe old age of probably 25.
Oh man, well now, so we usually, when we travel, I have 3 boys, and when we travel, if it's not a slam dunk where we can get a boarding pass and then do like family boarding, because my youngest is still pretty young, if it's like down to the wire, and we're like, all right, we're the last 5 people on the airplane, and it's obviously only middle seats left and stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, I got to sit my 7-year-old down and be like, look, dude, sit here, watch your iPad, don't hassle anybody. And when it's time to get off, just grab your bag, and we'll just walk up into the airport, and then just take 2 steps to the left and wait there. And we'll all meet up there. And he's like, are you serious? Like, I'm like, yeah, it'll be fine. And so So the first time he was like wide-eyed, and now he's like pro, dude. He grabs his bag, puts it on. Yeah, everyone's like, "Who is this kid?" And that's with all three of them. We're all sitting other places on the airplane, but it's a very peaceful way to travel with your kids scattered amongst the airplane. So.
Yeah.
You do have to brief them, though, Max. That's really smart. You have to give them this is how it's going to be. It's going to be fine, but we're going to get on the airplane. And it's one of those things that our kids have to learn at a young age.
Yeah, well, it's not a matter of like, are you going to be okay with this? Like, are you going to be okay by yourself? I just say, dude, here's what's happening. You're going to sit here. You're not going to hassle anyone. Watch your iPad and then meet me here. And he's like, okay. But
I wanted to talk to you guys today about what it's like to be on the road, be a mom, and kind of what that lifestyle looks like. So right in Yllithia, can you guys just talk a little bit about that journey that you guys have been on and what it's been like?
Sure. So it is a rather unusual arrangement in the industry to be just a one household pilot, and for mom to be that pilot. I know a lot of friends of mine that where both of the couple are pilots, and that's a little more usual because you meet in flight school or at an airline or so forth.
Right.
But yes, our case is a little more unique. I do have to say it makes things really easy for me because as far as the career has been concerned, I've been able to make these big moves without, having to really consider another person's career. It's been like, okay, take the first upgrade. You can commute to a base where you're more senior, but I don't have to worry about somebody else's schedule. And then as far as having kids is concerned, as you guys know, parental leave in the U.S., it hasn't quite caught up to other places like Europe and so forth. So one of the challenges was having to go back to work when both of my kids were about 12 weeks old. And the main impetus for that was because of health benefits. So if your spouse doesn't have health insurance, your health insurance at the particular airline is going to run out at about that point. And nobody wants to pay the exorbitant rates that are inactive insurance rates. So that's one of the challenges that you have as a mom, being the main income provider as well as the employer insurance program that you're working with. Another thing is just the technical difficulties of having a really young child and then being on the road. If you're choosing to, to nurse, then you have to deal with the implications of that and having to, pack your cooler around with you. And then for Ryan, he was introduced at a very early stage, being the only parent at home, not only with one infant, but then with an infant and a toddler. So that's going to be challenging for anybody, man or woman. And I'm sure you experienced that, Lindsey, when Dylan was on the road. But it's kind of unusual for at least for a dad to be in that position, at least in our field.
Ryan, you have an incredible head of hair for someone that had an infant and a toddler full time.
You should have seen it before the infant and toddler, right? Like a 3 head into a 5 head. It's receding. It's receding.
Oh,
so
man.
let me chime in real quick. Rewind before kids a little bit. Dating a pilot and being married to a pilot was really neat because I enjoyed how it kept things fresh. When she left, it was for 3 to 4 or 5 days. It's impossible to fight. All we did was look forward to each other, to seeing each other again. And then she's pregnant. And then we're stuck together for longer and figuring that out. And that was great. That ended up okay. That was a crapshoot, but we ended up liking each other. And then the kid comes and she had to go back to work, like she said, about 12 weeks in. And as a dad, that was, out of the frying pan into the fire as far as the kids waking up at 2 a.m. wanting to get nursed. And that's, how long do I want to hear him cry? So I'm running in the middle of the night to the bottle warmer. And it was a little unusual in that sense, in that I don't have the breasts or anything, but I did have the milk. So it just had to make the kid wait a few minutes. But that was a quick learning curve and easy to adjust to. And then when she was gone, it's not the normal mom's gone from 9 to 5. She was leaving for still 3 to 5 days. And that was different, being on the clock 24 hours a day for 3 days as a dad. But it wasn't insurmountable. The challenges weren't anything more than just waking up and dealing with this child that you love anyways. You want to be doing everything, but the janitorial aspect threw me for a loop. I didn't know that raising kids was 90% cleaning up, just undoing what they're doing. That was a hassle. I didn't know that being a father was get your broom and your mop, but
That
adjusting
tends
to
not
that part of
change
it
for a while.
it was hard.
Oh man, that's got to be tough. Well, how did you guys handle? I mean, I guess FaceTime and technology has played a part in that. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to use that early on?
Funny enough, my son, he wasn't big on FaceTime. He didn't really want to see me that way or chat with me when I was on the road. And I don't know if it was just his personality, because then with my daughter, it was a very different experience. She would just hold the phone and like walk around the house with me, just showing me things. And she was really into it. But for my son, we would connect when we got back, and I missed him terribly, but he really didn't want to chat on FaceTime.
So I think one of the reasons that neither of them have been too broken up when mom leaves for work, even though it's going to be a couple days. And I think it's because mom is a pilot. She's very A-type, and that translates into clean bedrooms. You better take that bath every night. Meal times are a thing. Everything's very cockpit-ish. And when that's fine. That keeps our house wonderful. Everything's on schedule, tight ship. But when mama goes, dad has different
Party
rules.
starts.
And I think the kids see it as a little vacation. They trash their rooms. They don't have to bathe, unless I see obvious things that need to be taken care of, like booger streaks or anything. And I think that it's a little vacation for them, a little bit. So they like the relationship with me. We have fun together. So when mom leaves, it takes the stress out of it in a good way.
Yeah, it's a break for them. I was just going to comment on kind of the flip-flop here in our house. Even though Dylan's a pilot, he's not the type A, and I'm not away from the kids as much as he is, but it is a party when I come back and the house is like turned upside down. So I very much can relate to you guys, but we're kind of in an opposite way.
We have a great time.
Oh yeah, maybe the difference it sounds like is that I let the clothes and the trash pile up to about knee high, but then I have a deadline. I know she's coming back. When I look up when her flight is going to be coming home, and I bust it for the hour before she gets here, for sure.
It's true. I have to give a little heads up.
He's got FlightAware up. He's tracking
on the screen on the big TV. All right, kids, T-minus 1 hour.
Yeah, it's like the NASA countdown.
She's got a 20-minute drive. Okay, so she should be.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yllithia, talk a little bit about what it was like for you to leave your kids when they were younger. Was the first kid, was it really hard to be gone? Did it get easier with the second kid? What was that like?
First of all, I don't think it got any easier with the second kid. I think it was really challenging initially. You're sad, you're leaving this infant, you're bonded, and they're so little. You just can't imagine them surviving without you. But then once you get to that hotel room and it's quiet and nobody's going to wake you up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, let's cut to the chase here and admit that everybody loves when they have an infant going to work and like just going to sleep and be like, this is gonna be so awesome.
Oh, it's just, it was, to be able to sleep where you wake up at 8 and you're like, wow, it was just a solid night of sleep. I feel recovered, and I almost needed that in a way. And then also to start getting that sense of self back, because you're so attached to your little one in the very beginning, and to go out there and like be a person other than this new mom or mom again, feels really good, right? It feels like, okay, we're getting back to normal. I'm sure, Lindsey, you can speak to that because it's such a intense experience having a very, very young baby.
Oh yeah, it's huge. And I almost, as you're talking, think that, there should be some sort of mandatory weekly vacation for moms with infants, just because of what you said. And, being on the opposite side of things, where I had an infant and a toddler, and Dylan was traveling a lot. And so I'm, going at the time, just going to this job that I hated, and we lived really far away. And when Dylan asked me to be on the show, and I was trying to, think back to that time of my life, I just remember driving home from this job to an empty house with my kids crying in the back, and just thinking, like, I feel like a shell of a human being. Like, it's sad. And it goes for a long time. It's your whole world revolves around those little kids for such a long time. And I totally lost touch with who I was. And I feel like I'm still, they're 6 and 8 now, and I'm still kind of putting those final pieces of the puzzle back in place, and like rebuilding like who I am. Like, there were a time I thought like I don't really even know what I like and what I don't like as a person anymore. So, yeah, I mean, and I'm probably a very extreme situation. Not everyone has a spouse who travels a lot, but I guess that's what the show is for. It doesn't always, I'm an anxious person by nature too. So there's a lot of other elements playing into that, but that was a very profound experience for me.
I think Ryan has experienced just a little bit of that sort of rediscovering himself once the kids get to a certain age. Ours are 4.5 and 8. So I do know that he's talked to me about that before.
One thing that makes it work with our situation is Yllithia's generosity. It works to my advantage for sure, that she misses the kids, that she likes our children, and so that when she's gone, she looks forward to coming back to them. That's a huge plus, because when she comes back, that eagerness to reconnect grants me that little bit of freedom that I was frankly just starting to get a little stir crazy and really need by the time she gets back. Because as much as I love being a dad, as much as I love caring for them and taking care of them, I mean, I love tennis too, but I don't want to do it 24 hours a day, 4 days in a row. There's things that I love that I could definitely die if I had to do it every day, all the time. And raising children is one of those. So I look forward to her coming back as much as the kids do, and this is purely her generosity, because she sets me free when she gets back. And that has added a lot of burden to her as well, because the mother job doesn't go away. So she's doing a difficult job, at least as far as her circadian rhythms and stuff are all thrown off when she's flying, because there's time changes, it's rough. And then she comes back, and I'm throwing the mop and bucket at her, basically, and saying, I need to go to the desert and camp for 2 days to reestablish what silence sounds like, or, hear myself think for a minute. And she lets that happen, thank goodness. And that's partly why it works between us. But then I'm in debt as well, because I get back, and not only is she ready to blow sometimes because the kids are challenging, but then she's got to go to work. So that's the tiptoe. That's the balancing act that we've had to find our way with to make it work.
Yeah, I think what's funny is that it doesn't matter from that standpoint if mom's the pilot or dad's the pilot. It's the same dynamic when you get home from work, and the one person that's been there with the kids, and then you got to pick up some of that slack and let them have a break, but you just came home from work, and it's this whole the dynamic that you have to figure out. So those people that are listening that are we've gotten listener questions and emails and stuff about like, hey, how do I explain like what this will look like in the future for my girlfriend or boyfriend, and because they're concerned about it and this and that. And that's, I think everybody has their own road, but there are certain things that are going to be an issue that has to be worked out on who's going to do what and how this is going to work when you're away and then you come home, because it's a very big line in the sand between those two things when you're home and you're away for both people. And everyone just has to figure out their own way to work it out, depending on their situation.
What would you say, with some perspective now, going back, was there one thing you guys did that you thought, oh man, this was really helpful, or one piece of advice you would give to people?
I'd say that the biggest thing for me, and what I have to continually remind myself, is that I need to ask for help. rather than martyr myself to whatever cause or whatever situation. So I need to ask him for help. I need to ask, in-laws or whatever I can do when I do need a break or if I need a nap, coming back, arriving in LA at 7 a.m. after a red eye across the ocean. And coming back here, I need to take at least a 3-hour nap before I'm even human. So that kind of thing where I need rest. And even though I'm coming back from, being gone 4 days, I understand that he's anxious to have a little space and a little time, but I just need to make my intentions clear and to make sure that he knows that I understand where he is. He understands where I am. We're going to help each other and try to be kind. And it's really hard in moments where you're really tired, you're frustrated, anxious, or, the house is a mess and that makes me grumpy.
I try really hard the hour before you get back to the house is not a mess.
Not a mess.
Record.
It's not a mess.
It's not that. It's a difference in standards. That's what I've noticed.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
Exactly. But so that's it. As simple as it is, just ask for help, communicate, and make sure that you're giving room for the other person to do the same in return. So communication's key. Any relationship expert will tell you that, but especially important here.
I would add one thing, just whatever it takes, whatever costs in quality of living, just you have to move close to the in-laws or to your own parents because that help is invaluable. I don't care if they live in somewhere wretched like International Fall. I mean, if you're going to...
Don't say that.
I'm sorry, I'm a warm weather person. I don't care if you have to freeze or bake, but to have the in-laws or the grandparents nearby, what a relief.
That is huge. That's what I say about flying too. It's like the difference between living in base and commuting. It's like two different jobs. And I think raising children amongst your in-laws and being by yourself is two different experiences too. He's spot on with that.
That goes for any, family with small kids, I think, but most especially if somebody is traveling. And sometimes you just can't do it all. Like especially if you're trying to work and the kid dropping them off and all, it's sage key advice there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only other thing I'll add for everybody that's probably listening to this that doesn't have kids and they're kind of freaked out right now, like, oh my God. The good news is at some point they all go to school for half of the day. And that's when you're like, oh my God, now I'm getting a little wiggle room here. I can, start doing stuff. And then it kind of, the commitment of all the time, 24 hours a day, suddenly disappears and you have a break in there and you're like, and then it gets easier from there. Yeah. So there's light at the end of the tunnel.
I have thought of that 5-year-old kindergarten through the progression all the way through high school. I've thought of that from birth until that moment as don't take this the wrong way, but as a prison sentence that you just have to work day by day. You have to do your time and you're not going to be free from it unless, you can't jailbreak. So you just, to me, there have been days when I'm like just marking it off the calendar. Like I survived you. And that 5-year-old deadline has come and gone for the 8-year-old. And then the youngest is 4.5 right now. So I'm a guy that can see the light at the end of the tunnel right now for sure.
You're like almost you're almost up for parole at this point.
You're going to be the guy that's pulling up to the school drop-off line and either has a mountain bike in the back or I've dropped my kids off with a side-by-side on a trailer. I'm like, see ya, 3:30, I'll be here. And party time. Yeah. Kind of like
that's right.
Exactly.
100%. But the other thing that is, though it might seem like doom and gloom that we're talking about having children and how challenging it is, it's also incredibly fun because by nature, our job, when we're gone, we're gone. But when we're home, we're not answering emails. We're not doing work, daily work. So we have all of this free time. And especially when they're young, Ryan and I traveled so much with our kids. When I was on maternity leave with my daughter, we went to Hawaii 4 times just because why not? You can non-rev over there. And especially when they're little and they're not in school, you can go during non-peak times and you can travel and you can get them used to travel. And it's a whole lifestyle that I'm really hoping the kids are very intrigued and want to, maybe pursue aviation themselves as a career, just because the lifestyle is so flexible. And as you guys know, you can really do these kind of epic trips that people that have 9-to-5 jobs really can't even, dream of. I mean, they have maybe a few weeks of vacation a year, but though we have paid vacation time, that doesn't mean that's the only time we're off. We have all these chunks of time where we are able to, have all these adventures. So I'd say it's actually a really fun life for kids from my perspective.
Can I tell you guys a quick story about Ronan? Ronan, our son, he at one point my wife Yllithia asked him if he might want to grow up and be a pilot, and he said, but I'm a boy. He thought because the only pilot he knew was Mama, he didn't think that boys could do it. Yeah. He had no idea that boys could be in that profession.
That's awesome.
God, so funny.
That's funny. Wow.
Yeah, Yllithia brought up a good point, though, which we just had another interview, and it's organically, you say the same thing that we were saying then, is that it's not necessarily the quantity, but the quality a lot of times, but really the quantities there, too, of time and being home. And like you said, when you get older, you realize that when you're not working, to be able to have nothing to have to do for work when you're at home is priceless. And that's huge, because that allows you to actually be present, instead of a lot of people I know that are not working are always kind of working,
Yeah, I would say Dylan was just out of town for maybe 2 nights in the last week, and our 8-year-old is just like, when is Dad going to be home? And it's like, dude, your dad takes you to the bus every day, picks you up from the bus you say your dad. So I try to explain it to him that most people's dads are gone until right before they go to bed, usually every night. And look at how, if the plane was in maintenance, because it's a different line of work than what you guys do for the airline. But we still get those chunks of time too, like if the plane is in maintenance or something like that. And we've been able to take off for the whole summer and stuff like that. So there's definitely, they feel it when Dad is gone, especially now. He's not gone as much as he was when they were little. And it almost is better that way. When they're little, I don't think they notice as much, or I don't know, but it seems that way. And so it's just, we've reached this really, really sweet place where we can really appreciate those huge pockets of time. And the kids don't know how good they have it, but they'll look back and they'll see it at someday.
When they're working 9 to 5.
Yeah. When they're in an office,
when he's an accountant and grinding it out 60 hours a week. He's like,
maybe my dad.
I'm never there for I'm the worst father. No, I'm just kidding.
Yllithia, I have a couple questions for you too, just about you mentioned the maternity leave and that kind of stuff. But I was just curious, what was it like to be pregnant and flying and traveling? And then also for some of our listeners who might be female pilots, what is the maternity leave, at least what your experience was? Can you run through all that?
Yeah, sure. As far as being pregnant, it's such an individual feeling as far as how much, how well you feel in order to fly. I felt really, really good through both of my pregnancies, and that I'm very fortunate I didn't have any morning sickness or anything like that. So with my son, I flew all the way till 8 months. And at that time, I was a captain at a regional. And I got the funniest looks, having this big old belly sticking out. And people were quite taken by that. Passengers loved it, though.
They have maternity pilot shirts?
So I had a sweater at the time, the sweaters with the epaulets.
Yes, very controversial outfit.
Yes, very controversial, but it worked really well for a pregnant belly because my jacket wouldn't close. So
did it ever get in the way when you were trying to flare?
No, not at all. I mean, you see guys that are bigger than me, even with a pregnant belly.
That's why I asked, because I've seen that be an issue.
No, not an issue at all. It never was. And then with my daughter, I worked a little bit less just because I had the toddler at home, so I was feeling more tired. So I stopped a little earlier. The general gist industry-wide is that you go on what's called short-term disability or temporary disability when you call out basically for being pregnant. At my company, they give you 6 weeks of paid time that starts running at that whenever you call out. So you're still pregnant. You get 6 weeks of normal pay time, and then you transition to your disability pay. And that disability pay goes all the way until about 6 weeks after birth. And that unless you have a cesarean, then it's a little bit longer. So unless you don't have any other complications, your disability pay stops at 6 weeks after birth. So at that point, you don't have any additional pay unless you have a benefit like from the state of California, the state of New York, and I think also Washington State has a maternity benefit. But that's it. So you have to plan for it financially in order to stay out longer than that. And a lot of airlines give 1 year of unpaid leave. So you can have unpaid leave, not lose seniority. You don't have health benefits or anything, but at least you can take that unpaid leave if you are in a financial position to do so. For us, we weren't, just because we have the one income, So that's why I went back to work at 12 weeks, which would be the end of the state pay. And also because of the health benefits, that's another complication that's thrown in there. You want to have health benefits when you have an infant and you've just given birth. So it's really important for me that I had those active health benefits in case anything went wrong. So it's kind of just a vague description of what maternity leave is like. And it might be different at different companies, but that was my personal experience.
And you had mentioned earlier, passengers would love to see a pregnant pilot. What would they say to you? Did you get a lot of questions? What was that like?
I think mostly they would just touch my belly, which is very strange, to have strangers come up and touch your belly. But when you're saying goodbye to them on the plane and standing at the flight deck door, and this was especially when I was on a regional plane, which was the regional jet, which was a little bit smaller, they would come up and be like, oh, look at this, and touch my belly, which is always inappropriate.
Yeah, never do that to anyone.
Oh, is he going to be a pilot? Is your kid going to be a pilot? You probably heard that all the time too, right?
Yeah. My kids do love knowing that they flew around with me. They think that's really clever. They think they've flown in the front of planes. Because they were in utero. They love talking about
That's one unique thing with a female pilot. Yeah, Ronan had so many miles under his belt, airline miles. I can't prove that this is correlated, but there was one time we were descending into Maui, and he was about 3 years old. And I swear it's just the familiarity of being in the air and turbulence from Yllithia, from being up there in utero. Can't prove it, but the turbulence coming down was gnarly. It left like 3 people in tears. There was screaming. And when we hit those pockets and dropped and then stabilized and dropped, he couldn't stop laughing. He sounded like the Joker on Batman, like a maniac. He was in heaven. It was better than a roller coaster ride for him. And we're talking like people screaming and crying, and he was just So I can't prove that was from flying in utero, but he's so comfortable in the air.
Yeah.
And that was fun. Still fun.
That's funny.
That's so funny. Ryan, for you, what advice would you have for a father that maybe they could be at home with their kids full time? What maybe did you wish you knew beforehand? And what would you say to somebody that could be in a similar path as you?
Yeah, you are going to have to reinvent yourself. I was somebody that didn't care about giving up a career or anything. I never had any I don't want to use the word ambition, but anything I liked well enough that I was afraid or disappointed to give it up. So the thing that I wasn't really looking forward to giving up with children was my alone time. I knew who I was. I knew what I liked. And all that goes right out the window when you just don't have any free time to go pursue those things anymore. So I would say just be patient with yourself and with your spouse, because you're going to have to build yourself over again from the ground up. There was a growing period where I had no idea where I was going to find the same moments of joy that I did before. I mean, the kids brought a different joy. It's true. But when 100% of what you used to know to make yourself happy changes, then there's a pretty long-winded period there when I just had to have patience, because it was frustrating to not be able to pursue like travel like I used to, or even even a 4-hour golf round or anything. And then to take those moments anyways, as soon as you have kids, takes that time away from your spouse. So it's not, everything you do creates a debit on the other side. So I didn't like watching all the work that I felt like I should be doing pile up on Yllithia here. So I think generosity toward your spouse and toward yourself in that period where you're recalibrating is really important. It was for me.
That's well said. I know you have similar feelings, right, Lindsey?
Yeah, I could almost echo the same thing when it's kind of what I had already mentioned about, you have to rebuild yourself. Like you just, and it's totally different. At least as a woman, some girl, a little girl's dream of the day that they can have a baby and they have a family, and maybe there's some sort of mental process that helps them, with that major life shift when the baby comes. For me, it was kind of like, well, I know I always wanted a family, but I never dreamed of the joy of holding a baby in my arm. I was just not like that. And I feel like I can say that more freely now and feel less guilt because I've realized that that's okay. And a lot of people are the same, but a lot of people aren't. And so for me, I think it was a bigger shock, and that played into a lot of what I mentioned earlier about kind of losing a sense of who I was completely. But yeah, I like how you use the word recalibrate, because that's just what I did. And it took years, and I feel like now that they are both in school, they're in kindergarten and second grade. So that's been a major help. But it's kind of an ongoing thing. Just everything changes when you have kids. But back to, we don't want to discount the joy that comes with it. It's just different. It's just a life change. So there's plenty of good joy. There's so much love and so much joy, so many of these other things you would never otherwise know. So it's a very balanced thing. And I feel like we keep, talking about the hard part of it, because it is really hard. But yeah, we don't want to discount how lovely it is also.
That's right. I have a question for you, Ryan.
Yes.
When I'm at home alone with the kids, I probably call Lindsey at least probably 3 to 4 times a day and be like, where's the peanut butter? What's the clothing? All of ththese random questions. And I think that's a lot of dads will do that. But Yllithia's in the air. You probably can't get a hold of her. Did you just have to figure out everything on your own? Or are you still able to get in touch?
Or you just call dispatch?
Is there a bat phone? Yeah, a car's message can you send? How does that work?
I'm on it. I don't really need. Yllithia is all plus. She, it's like help, but not a necessity. If she, it's all benefit, right? But I can't remember a time when I needed. It's not like I'm gonna ask her where the strainer is or something. I know where all of that kind of thing is. We just use her for emotional support, and in the air. I never have to call her for anything more than oh, Ruby really wanted to talk to you. She got a boo-boo or something like that. I'm not the stereotypical dad where I don't know where things are, because I've done a lot of work on this house over the years. So there's not a wall or a cupboard or something that I haven't been really deep into. So I know where things are and how to deal with the kids.
He's very capable. And I think that is one of the benefits of our situation, is that it kind of kicks your stereotypical roles to the curbside, because he has had to be capable in a way that most moms are required to be capable. And so I feel like not only is he totally able to take care of the whole situation at home, school, everything, and he does bathe the children. Don't let him say he doesn't. But it's also what it allows for is the kind of closeness that our children have with him is I think enviable in other positions, because our kids, if they get hurt, it's not like they have a preference or run to me. They'll readily run to their dad. Both of us, we sort of have equal standing with them as far as closeness. And as parents, you can probably relate to what I'm talking about. There's a level of comforting and nurturing and laying down at night to say goodnight. Either one of us can do that with our kids. And so it's very balanced in that regard. And so I think taking care of things on the road. I never get calls about, and I don't have to put out fires when I'm on the road. At home, it really is just what Ryan said. We just like to connect when I'm on the road. So it would be call, just to say hi, say goodnight, talk about the day. And that's really it. And that's something that I feel so fortunate to have in my partner, because then I don't have to worry when I'm gone. And being gone away from them, I know everything's okay and everything's taken care of. And we don't have to worry about childcare either. So that's the luxury of having a parent that stays home full time. So we don't have to juggle that element of it. And really, he's okay.
I think it's interesting when you said that. It made me think of something about, who your kid runs to or who puts him to bed every night. And I think that those roles in a traditional setup, where a lot of times it's always mom that puts him to bed or takes him to school. And that's one of the things when dad's a pilot, is that when I'm home, I've always taken the kids to school just because I can, and picked them up and been there to put them to bed. And so those times that you are off, you're able to do a lot of those things that most dads Monday through Friday working a normal job don't do. And so it kind of puts you on more of a level ground, even though you're gone sometimes. Like, it's not this like mom, dad, big difference, where I think the roles, it kind of overlaps a little bit more when either mom or dad's the pilot,
And the thing you said that resonates with me, Yllithia, is you're not putting out fires when you're on the road. And I think that is one of the secrets to like long-term happiness for a family in aviation, because it's, if you're on the road and you're working, it is stressful. And then to have to deal with other stuff beyond that, it just makes it even more challenging. So I think that was really well said.
You can be honest about the stresses of being on the road, because Yllithia calls and she's like, oh, I'm neck deep in diapers. And she's like, oh, it's been so stressful. And she's on I see in the background, she's in Cancun. She's sitting on a beach. And I'm like, yeah, you're pretty stressed out, are you? Yeah. Meanwhile, there's wailing and I don't care how much sleep you got. Cancun looks nice. Don't talk to me about you're stressed.
Dylan, we started a policy a long time ago where I would, especially when you flew charter and he was always in Cabo or something like that, and I'm like, up to my eyeballs in dirty diapers, and he just stopped telling me. It's like there's no, and he'd be with another pilot sending pictures home of their cocktails on the beach, and he's like, there's no way. I'm not, and it was good. It was just like a don't ask, don't tell, because I couldn't handle it at the time, and now I can, and I want to know a little bit more about what he's up to, and I'm in a much better place than I used to be. But yeah,
yep. When I was at the worst of it, she would strategically not tell me about Cabo and Cancun, but she would tell me when she was in International Falls. Not to bring that place back up again, but she would tell me when it was cold and wet outside, and I'm like, oh, and then not when she was, in Costa Rica.
Secret. The weather sucks. The food's bad. The hotel room is uncomfortable. Those are the messages. That's the key to
Every flight's a red eye.
Yeah, that's right. So Ryan, we're getting ready to wrap up here, but I was just curious, have you had any funny experiences or anything crazy happen on the road, or while Yllithia's on the road and you're at home with the kiddos, or anything wild? No, I'm so good at what I do. There's never any problems here at all. No, that's not, there's nothing like that, but I just, if I had advice for dads out there, it'd be to be more honest about everything across the process. Because no dad out there, not my own dad, nobody's dad, told me the truth of raising children. And I don't know if that's because my dad took more of a backseat, but you're allowed to say how janitorial and awful it is on occasion, because it would be wrong to conflate that with not loving your children, because the love is there 100%. Never loved anything more. And it's also the most tedious, back-breaking, wretched prison-like job. And never the twain shall meet. The love has nothing to do with how wretched changing diapers is and warming bottles at 2 a.m. And so I felt liberated. I mean, eyebrows get raised when I've tried to be honest about the wretched parts of raising children. And I just want to go pinch that eyebrow and bring it back down and be like, don't assume I don't love my children. I love them more than I could possibly say.
But this is the other part of it that nobody told me about, and I could have used some real-time stories on that end to prepare me for that. That would have been helpful. So that's all I have.
That's it, folks. You heard it here first. Honesty from a dad. The straight shot over the bow.
At last.
My last piece of advice would be that while you have to nurture your kids and you're nurturing your career together, don't forget to also nurture your relationship with your spouse. And that means if that means going to therapy and learning how to communicate, then do it. And don't be shy to try to make that work better, because the better that your relationship works, the better the entire arrangement's going to work. Your kids are going to be happier. You're going to be able to be more fulfilled in your career. If you drop that ball, that relationship ball, everything's going to shatter. So you need to be going into it with eyes wide open, knowing that it's very challenging. And when you start adding a child into the mix, you're no longer each other's first priority. And that's the problem. You still need to make your relationship a priority. And that's the biggest piece for us that we've found that makes this the whole situation work, with the challenges of being gone and the challenges of raising children.
Well, I think that pretty much sums it up, Dylan.
It's great. Thank you so much, Ryan and Yllithia, for taking some time.
It's a very good perspective.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
That mixture, you know it's rich. Elon Musk, ayy.
All right, up next we have Anna, who's a military pilot wife. But speaking of the military, Dylan, have you ever been intercepted by the military?
No, I mean, I've been buzzed a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, we may have used to fly through a MOA every once in a while, and
oh yeah, remember you
may or may not.
What would happen if that fighter came up on you and he matched your speed and heading? What would you do?
I guess that would mean we were like getting paced for a race would be my guess.
Like intercepted, right?
Yeah.
They form up on you.
Yeah. I would.
Are you supposed to do anything? How do you
it's
let them know you see them? What are you supposed to do?
I think it's like an aerobatics challenge. Like I would try and do a chandelle and then see if they could keep up, maybe. Is that right? No.
No. And I'm not even going to tell you. You know where you can find this information, though? There is a response that you're supposed to do during the daytime and nighttime, and a myriad of other responses in response to what they do.
Okay.
And you can find this on an upcoming blog post this month from our friends at the Advanced Aircrew Academy.
Oh.
Sounds like something you should read, Dylan.
Definitely. I should probably it would probably be good for me to maybe just devote like the next 12 months to going through all the modules at Advanced Aircrew Academy. Maybe.
Yeah, literally. Well, it's, obviously there's so much to know. It's constantly changing. Advanced Aircrew Academy is the premier provider of aviation training online for literally a veritable cornucopia of subjects, Dylan. I just took the cold weather one. It's amazing how much I found out I still don't know about cold weather.
Well, you're wearing a jacket,
operations.
so you learned something.
aircrewacademy.com if you're in need of online training for your flight department, for your certificate holders, whoever. Aircrew Academy is the place to go.
Thanks, guys. All right. Well, speaking of military, let's talk to Anna and see what that's like to military wife transitioning to the airlines with 4 kids, by the way.
Yeah, right. A lot of transitioning. She's
All
right.
Here we go.
A great example of a positive attitude.
Well, Max, we received an email from a listener, and they were in the military, and they said, "Hey, I'm getting ready to transition to the airlines. I want to help my family prepare for what that's going to be like. You know, there might be similarities from being a military family to being an airline family. There's probably some differences." And they wanted some advice from us on what that was like. And neither of us were in the military, so we didn't really have anything to offer. But one of our listeners wrote in and he said, "Oh, you guys should talk to my wife, Anna." And Anna is joining us on the program today. Anna, you were in a military family. Your husband's now an airline pilot. And we would love to hear a little bit about your guys' story and how you've handled two very demanding careers in raising a family. So welcome to the program, Anna.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me.
So Anna, can you start off and just kind of tell us a little bit about the military journey you guys did, and then we'll talk a little bit about the airlines after that.
Sure. My husband was a helicopter pilot in the Navy. And so we actually got married right as he was transitioning to a reservist. So he was flying in the reserves, and that just takes a lot of time. It's not just, you're 2 weeks. Oh, you're in your 2 weeks. See ya. It's like lots of weekends and a month or two here and there. So as we've been married, that's really kind of been most of our military flying. And then he had a deployment just recently. And he's, we're kind of older. We're middle-aged. And so I was surprised. I think he was surprised by a deployment. And I'm like, what? But, send the young one. That's kind of how I felt. But
right.
You don't get to pick. And so he had a 12-month deployment right as I found out that I was pregnant with our fourth. And so,
oh,
are you
yeah.
serious? Does that mean like he's gone for 12 months straight? Or
yeah,
you're kidding me?
So, thankfully, we were at the time, we were living where my family lived, and we had really great community. And so I did feel really supported. And so I think that's one thing that's really awesome about military communities, that especially if your family is in the aviation community, you have, you kind of just have like immediate friends when you get someplace, you're in a squadron, there's somebody who calls you and says, hey, welcome, and like, here's the wives club. And, you kind of have that support. And everybody knows, everybody's had husbands gone for birth, and everybody's had husbands gone for, big days. And they just come get it and help you and come help make it special for your kids. And that's beautiful, and so he's still in the reserves. He's not flying in the reserves right now. And so that's sort of military stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We did kind of start a family business for several years, 3 years, maybe I can't keep track. I'm sorry. I should have written it down.
You have 4 kids. You've got enough to keep track of.
Yeah. So we had a business for a little bit that, we liked it. We liked what we were doing. And I think just sort of as the commercial industry started hiring more and more people, Nick sort of thought, well, I have all this training to fly. Maybe I should fly. And so we went down that path. And since he was a helicopter pilot, he had a lot of catching up to do as far as hours and all that. So 4.5 years ago, we decided to switch. We sold our business, and we kind of thought, okay, we're going to take 18 months. Nick's going to build hours. and then he'll be at a major. And, it's going to be a hard 18 months because it's like 70% pay cut.
Right.
But we can do it, especially like on the heels of a deployment, you have that. It's hard and it's not, nobody wants a deployment, but you do have the money from a deployment. And so there was that. Plus we had just sold our business. And so we were like, okay, well, we have the savings. Let's do it. We can make it 18 months. We can do it. Well, 4.5 years later, he really just kind of got hired by a major just now. So it's been rough.
I imagine the sacrifices you've had to make obviously are many, and then trying to juggle children on top of that as an additional challenge. I guess it was different, right? The military sacrifices versus maybe his time and training and getting to a job, they were different. Was one harder for you than the other?
I would say, I think they're similar. I think they're, of course, with a deployment or with, workups or, even just a couple months gone, you can kind of tell your kids, like, this is honorable. This is what your father's doing is honorable, and he's protecting our country and help the helicopter guys, work with a lot of,
medevac,
like helping people when there's yes, thank you, humanitarian aid. And so, there's like that part of the discussion. And so that maybe is a little easier to have that kind of conversation when your kids are old enough to say, well, why isn't he young? And why can't we, why are we celebrating Christmas?
So saying, well, Dad picked up this trip and it was a double time. And so I know it's your birthday, but if you want that go-kart, no.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, I think that, I would say maybe just because of the community, I think that military was a little bit easier maybe, but, it's not, I think it is so, it's just, there are hard days. There are hard days. And there are really good days. I will say, I think with him doing commercial, one of the best things is when he's home. And he is, I think that both of us, maybe because of that, military separations and whatever, you really, I think, here's what I think. I think that if you are succeeding as a family in a military environment, like he's gone for 3 months, he's home, he's gone for 2 weeks, he's home, if you are succeeding as a family and making that work, you can make it work with commercial flying. And honestly, of course, there are families who complain and gripe the whole 3 months or the whole 12 months that somebody's gone. That doesn't make it easier, but there are, I can think of probably 3 women that have, been along in my journey who are just such good example of, this is what it is. And we're going to have fun. And let's, whatever it is, make a paper chain of all the days that Papa's going to be gone, and let's count them down until he comes back. Let's find 5 fun things, really fun things to do while he's gone. And we're going to tell him about it, and finding those ways to make it fun, for your family. That's the game changer, and just like, here's what we're doing, and it's great. And, that's a game changer. If you can't do that in the military, you can't do it when your husband's a commercial pilot either, So, yeah, I mean, I think that quality time of when he's home, commercial flying, there's literally nothing that he has to do. No emails to answer, nothing. And so what I started to say before was, because of that military experience, I think both of us have really had to work on and develop an empathy for what the other person is going through. Because of course, it's like in commercial flying right now, sometimes the schedule just works out that he goes to Colorado Springs and he has 2 dead days or whatever you call them. If he's just sitting in a hotel, he doesn't have a car. And when you're on, regional pay, you can't go anywhere. You just can't do anything fun. And so he's sitting there in a hotel by himself for 2 days. Well, I'm like, at the our kids just went to school. We've been homeschooling. But, when I was homeschooling with 4 kids at home and just juggling all of that, he might want to complain about sitting in a hotel doing nothing, and there's only so many runs you can go on or so many movies you can watch before it's
Right.
just, ugh. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I would give anything to just sit in a
Just sit
hotel
there
room.
and watch TV
Nobody
and
talk
take
to
a nap.
me. Nobody. Yeah, exactly. So, just knowing that's a sacrifice for him to be having that kind of a schedule, as much as it is a sacrifice for me. It just looks different,
Yeah, I would. The question I have, I guess, is that knowing that you could be deployed for 12 months or even having to go away for 2 months and things like that, that would bring a certain level of like anxiety, knowing that that's like kind of looming, where at least at an airline, after you're through initial training, like it's never going to be like that,
Right.
and most of the time it's a 3-day trip or whatever, but occasionally if you have to go back to training, you might be there for a little longer. But does that give you some relief just knowing that that's not, well, I guess he's in the reserve still, so you're not totally absolved from that, right?
I know. Like, I'm ready to retire yet. Yeah, no, I would say that. And I would say also, I think one other perk of commercial flying is you're not moving so much. I mean, when we were first married, I think we moved 4 times in 18 months. Like,
Oh my gosh.
just here for 6 months, here for 3 months. And because we were newlywed, I was like, well, let's go. Let's do it together, But there's a lot of stress in moving. And so, once you get to where you want to be, and you decide, okay, are we going to live in base? Or are we going to live out of base? Are we going to live whatever? There's that, like, you can decide you're going to live someplace and just live there. It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's the
Things
cool
we take
thing.
for granted.
Yeah,
You never
but-
think about that as never having been in the military. Like, you could just pick where you want to live. Like, what a novelty,
Well, but I think that's that's something that your family is equipped with. Max and I talk about this all the time. Commuting is a massive challenge when you're at an airline. And for a lot of folks, when they're getting hired at their major airline, maybe they're 40, 35 to 40 years old. They're very established, from a family standpoint, and they've got a lot of roots, and moving to a base could be very difficult. And some people choose not to do that, where I think, that's something that you guys are probably more equipped to handle. When you get that final destination job and you say, hey, maybe we're going to move, that might be a little easier for you
we
guys.
have to move again, but this will be the last time.
Right. This will be the last time. Where do we want to live?
And then you can,
So do you feel that way? And like if he said, hey, I just got hired at an airline and we're going to have to move to Dallas or something, like do you think, oh, I've moved so many more times, I can't stand another move? Or you're like, hey, I've done this before.
Let's just do it one and done.
Yeah.
One more and done, I should say.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, we have this conversation all the time. We joke that, this is our 18-month transition that's been 4.5 years. And so we have just perpetually had the conversation, well, where would you want to live? Where would you, if we lived in Salt Lake City, or if we lived in Atlanta, or if we lived in New York, or, it is one of our pastimes looking at Zillow in all these cities, like, wow, just cool, different areas. And, yeah, I think just about probably, I don't know. I'm a little intimidated being like a military spouse spokesman, because it's just, everybody's different. Everybody has different experiences. And,
yeah.
But I would say, like, I do think that a lot of my friends who, have had a, military career, and you moved 12 or 20 times in your career, you are done. You're done, and you're like, okay, let's get settled. Because I think there's always, that that wants to have community, and you can't really do that with, in 3 years.
Yeah, well, and two, just that would be a hard way to live. Just like, you don't want to buy too much stuff because you might have to move, and you don't want to get too used to this house. Like, it's always like you're kind of just, this is sort of long-term temporary, Whereas I think if you
keeps you
move to a
bit.
base and you're like, it's your final destination job, and you're like, okay, take a breath. Now we know we're going to stick around here for a while, unless he gets furloughed, which is part of the airlines, and then you have to start all over again. But that, that probably won't happen. I'm sure that, yeah. I mean, have you read the book Hard Landings, though? No.
Did you know?
Wouldn't happen to me.
Yeah. Did you know anything about the lifestyle of what an airline pilot, what that entailed? Were you able to talk to anyone? Did you have friends in the industry? Was there any way that you were able to educate yourself about, like, oh, well, he's gone for 4 days and then home for 3, and then he bids once a month? Or how did you learn about how that life worked?
Yeah, I don't think like that. I don't think to ask questions. I'm just like, let's roll with it. My husband, Nick, it does think like that. And so he did the research. And which probably what kind of makes us work, because I'm like, all right, let's do it. It sounds good to me. Let's do it. And then you get in it and you're like, oh, holy cow. But yeah, I mean, I think that for everybody, it just experientially, you just have to figure out what works for your family. I know people who get work better for them to kind of stack their schedule to either do, 180 on, 180 off, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. I find that I really like that when his schedule works to do 3 days home, 4 days away, 4 days home, 3 days away, just kind of that smaller bits and rhythmic. I feel like that is for me, that's my kind of sweet spot of what I'm always hoping he gets,
Well, the good news is, at a major airline, that's pretty much how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the time.
Anna, you mentioned having a sense of community, and a lot of support with the military, with other military spouses and that kind of stuff. There are some resources available, and some of that available on the commercial and the airline side. Did you get connected with any fellow spouses that were kind of in a similar situation? Did you find support? Did you find you even needed it, or can you talk a little bit about that?
I didn't really reach out for that. And maybe just because, we have young kids, and I just didn't. Because it just feels like so much work to make.
Right.
I mean, it's a lot of work to make new friends,
Yeah.
And it's a lot of, then once you have 4 kids coming with you everywhere you go, it's a little more to balance. And so, I love that those exist though. I don't, and I would say too, like we live in base, but we don't live, kind of like where all the pilots live, you know what I mean? And so, I think if you lived in a neighborhood like that, like there's so many, like only because we're like, I think there are sort of pods of like, like Peachtree City in Atlanta, or
Right.
in Dallas, Fort Worth, there are a couple pods of like where people who work at the airport live, and we live out in Fort Worth. So, yeah, I love that those exist. I didn't know about them.
Well, I think it's kind of branched off from the military support, like you were explaining previously, where it's something that can be useful for a lot of people that aren't used to that sort of lifestyle, that are put into it. That then, like you've kind of done this program of, your husband being gone and then being here and you having to move and figure things out, where when that's new to people, I think the support is a lot more important, versus now you're like, no, I've been doing this for a long time. Plus you have 4 kids.
Okay, so how would people know about that? Is that like a Facebook page? Is that like, how do people know about
Yeah,
those
it's
things?
relatively new, and that's kind of how we just interviewed a gal that runs a podcast and has a Facebook group and stuff like that. It's kind of a new thing, I would say, right?
Yeah, a lot of the Facebook groups have been around for a while, but there's like I've seen like the American Airlines pilots' wives group, and I think kind of every, and obviously I think most of those are in their big hub cities and stuff like that. So I think there are people that are starting to generate some communities and some support. But I think also just kind of, my wife isn't in any of those groups and I'm not in any of them, but I've seen that I've heard stories of like what you mentioned earlier. There's some people with some kind of toxic attitudes in there too. So I think you got to make sure you're surrounding yourself with the right types of people.
Like that.
Like,
sure.
Always some bad apples in every group. Like, try to drag everybody down.
If you're in a group that's just complaining all the time, is that really helping you? I don't really know. But,
Right.
but I think like what you said, it's just a mindset thing, right? I mean, that's what it really boils down to. You can make it as good or as bad of an experience as you choose to make it. But I think, you probably, I'm just going to guess, when you were 20, in your 20s, and you guys probably met and got married, you probably didn't know much about what the path ahead was going to look like, right? It was kind of,
Sure.
And so I guess if I gave you a time machine now and you could go back and talk to your younger self as you're kind of signing up for this, what advice would you give to yourself, or maybe somebody that's in a similar shoes, with kind of long-term dreams of being at the airlines after military service? What would you say to somebody like that?
Save your money. Start saving now. If you have time on your side, save now, literally for 2 years worth of income. I feel like military people are okay with talking about money just because everybody knows what everybody makes. But, when we started at a regional, we had every 2 weeks a $1,400 paycheck. And that's like, what? Especially with the family, if you're transitioning from military and you have a family and you're used to all the perks of, like great health care and, you have to go do this, you have to go do this debt or this workup, and you get bonus money for being away from your family. There are those little things that help. Nick was gone for a year, and there's at least a little bit of money to help you make it. Like, hire somebody to do what you cannot do. I mean, I'm one person. I can't do it all. And I had, and I had a baby while he was gone. So it helped us be able to, hire somebody to help us clean once a month so that there's like some semblance of like sanitation around here, know, like, and like, when it just got really hard, there's money to buy food that's semi-healthy from someone else, and there's not that. When you're in a regional, there's not that. And so, and then not to mention, I'm so thankful we haven't had any huge house emergencies. We haven't had any huge, stuff like that, big like car emergencies or anything in the last several years. And I mean, that, like, I would say save all your money and brace yourself. Like, I mean, we tried our very best to not go into debt. And okay, so we have this savings for thinking, okay, that's going to get us 18 months. If we had to really stretch, we could do 2 years. Well, here we are 4.5 years later. And I mean, it's like, put on your big girl panties. What decisions are you going to make in this budget meeting that nobody likes budget meetings, right? And you're with your spouse. But like, what can you give up? And, like, I quit dyeing my hair and I quit, like, I don't know, just all the things. Like, Nick, my dear Nick, he loves cigars and he buys really cheap cigars. So, and I know that's a sacrifice for him. And I'm like, all the things that, are just hard. They're just hard. And like, Nick and I have this rolling joke that, like, we look at something and we think that would be really nice to have. And we just put on year two of a major. We got a really long year 2 list.
I was just going to say, you're almost there. 1 more year, you'll be on second year pay. And then these problems will all fade into oblivion, hopefully. Right. But your hair does look great. I don't think you need to dye it anyway. Yeah. So just for the record.
It's funny. Nick's cheap cigars.
Poor guy.
Well, that is good. Go ahead.
Well, and I have mantras. One of the mantras that I really, in seriousness, have said to Nick and to myself several times is, it's a form of self-respect to buy only what you can afford. And, it is hard. And it's hard because we live in a society of such abundance. And it's so hard to say no. But the reality is you can, as long as it takes to go through the Chick-fil-A line and spend $45 for your family to have a quick dinner, in that same amount of time, you could go to the grocery store and have bananas and peanut butter and turkey rolls and everybody's satisfied, and a big thing of goldfish. Like, I mean, I have kids, so my kids are satisfied with that kind of a thing. But like, it's, we just, it's hard. I don't know. It's hard to make those paradigm shifts of it really is cheaper, quicker, and easier to do that second thing of, a quick meal. It was really hard for me to shift that. Shift
it is
over
for
to
everybody.
that.
I mean, that's always, especially in our society, everybody's loves stuff.
Yeah.
And, but at the end of the day, I think, you have to take a step back and realize stuff isn't actually what makes you happy. Like, I've seen being in business aviation and flying for some very, very wealthy people. That have everything and they're miserable. And you're just like, Well, that's a lesson learned right there. Is you're like, wow, stuff truly doesn't make you happy, and time is the prime asset. So,
well, it's like what Dave Ramsey says: you got to live like no one else, so you can live like no one else. But I mean, it's kind of true because it's for most families in aviation, they are going to have to make sacrifices and missing holidays and birthdays. And, we've talked about that with our other guests, but we really didn't get into the financial aspect too much.
No,
so I think it's a great point that you bring up, Anna, because especially once you've got your family established, like you're saying, and having to take a pay cut, with 4 kids to make that dream a reality, that takes commitment and boldness in a way, because it sounds like you guys sat down, you had a plan. It's 18 months. We're going to do this thing. And that plan didn't work out, but you stuck with it. And that, I think, is a really good introduction to aviation, because that's basically how my career and probably
that's
your
how
career,
it goes. I've been laid off of jobs, and you never expect, and
never goes the way.
Yeah, nothing. You can't plan a career in aviation. It's so much of your career is dependent on timing, which is therefore dependent on luck when you're ready. And so it's yeah, that was good. I didn't expect your story to kind of go that way, and a lot of military stories I think are going to be different. Your husband had an extra hurdle in that he came from helicopters, and then he had to kind of close the gap on fixed wing, where an Air Force dude flying a KC-135 just shows up at the same Delta class or United or American or whatever. And so it's different for everybody, but that's an interesting story.
And talk about timing. I mean, like, we had no idea he was going to be deployed. We had no idea that there would be a pandemic. So, like, all those things that you just can't plan for. And and I think it's interesting. I think it's important too. Like, we've even had a lot of these conversations with our kids. I mean, our kids are young. The oldest is 10. And so, but like having those conversations out loud, or even in the presence of kids, not saying too much, but like, I've said to, because Nick just got hired, we just pointing out the tenacity and the perseverance and the, I don't know, the just stick to itness of, like, we said this is the plan and it can work. I just know it can work. That Nick has had over 4 years, more than 4 years. That's I really admire that in him. And I think that's important to show your kids, you're not going to be handed everything. Sometimes you get a really lucky break and it just happens. And you moved straight from the Air Force and this basically Airbus to this Airbus, and it works, and you're here and it's great. And yay. Most of the time in life, you've got to really figure it out and really make it work and really decide, is this what I want, or is it not worth it to me? And I think so often, our kids are sheltered from, or maybe I feel like I was kind of sheltered from that reality of, what it takes to be a mom, what it takes to be an adult.
Right.
So, I think in all of it, it's just, I don't know, taking what you got and making it better.
I think, when I look back in my experience when Lindsey and I have gone through hard times and had to make sacrifices, I feel like it does bond you in a way too, because you're pulling together, you're trying to overcome a challenge, and I'm sure it's uncomfortable in the moment, but I think as we look back, and I'm sure at some point you and Nick will look back at this experience too and be like, wow, we did this, we got through this, and we're stronger because of it, and we're closer because of it. So that's probably tough to think about
when you're in
the moment.
Yeah.
When you're driving by the Chick-fil-A going, no,
Right. I know. I taught with one of my very favorite people that I ever taught with was a lady that was like 20 years my older. probably elder. And she always talked with such fondness of those years when they lived in this little studio apartment. And, you know, they were just starting out, and her husband was in school for a really long time. And just those years of hard and really close because they didn't have much space, you know? And I think about that a lot with the fondness that she was able to see in that time. There's something that comes out of I hate
discomfort,
suffering. Yeah, we're not really suffering.
Well, it's called embracing the suck. Sometimes you have to embrace the suck, and that's
right.
literally what it is. I mean,
and something
you got to figure out a way to embrace, you know, the tough times because it's either that or the alternative, which isn't fun for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Anna, before we let you go, do you have any good stories or experiences you'd like to share with us of your experiences, maybe at the airline or in the military of raising 4 kids and your husband being deployed and working on a new career, and anything come to mind?
This is hard because there's so many good things, but you know, okay, I'm going to say one quick piece of advice.
Yes.
Is write down all the time your spouse was home when something really hard happened. Because it's so easy to just say, oh gosh, it always happened. You know, the pipe always burst when gone, or, you know, all the crazy things. And
that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, because we've said that too. I'm like, God, everything always happens when I'm gone.
Yeah,
but that's actually not true. It just sticks out in your mind because you just it's way harder.
That's a good one.
That's a really good.
Yeah,
piece
the
of advice.
dad's in town calamity list.
Yeah. So the last 2 calamities Nick has been here for. My son, who is our oldest, so he's, you know, just loving life and flipping over bikes and climbing trees and all the things. And this last year, he broke 2 bones separately, and Nick was here for him. And he was the one who got to take him to the emergency room, and the rest of us got to stay home. So, yeah, I mean, I would say also, one really big perk and why we were homeschooling for a big chunk, is travel benefits. And, I mean, I feel like I could tell you countless stories of taking 4 kids by myself somewhere to go have a fun weekend or go see family, or, you know, go to a baseball game of a cousin. And that's priceless. You know, it's really, really fun. And if your kids are little and you're doing that by yourself, it's really hard.
Yeah.
But we haven't done that in a while because we have a runner. Right now we have a runner. Till she grows out of that, we can't do it anymore.
But you're right, though. That flexibility is in the homeschooling. So I was actually homeschooled all the way through high school. And
cool.
I remember the same thing. Like, my family was able to do cool things that other families weren't, because we're like, oh, we'll just pick up and do school there for a little bit, and we can move here or do whatever. And so that's a really an underrated aviation family program, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. I sort of hope we do it again. We just started school at this semester break because timing is everything, you know, and you just, I don't know. I have a dear friend that helped me when we started homeschooling. She said, just write the week till it's not working anymore. And we, in the summer, Nick started 2 months of captain training for the regional. And then he got hired by a different company So then he did, I don't know, 3 months of training out of town. And then he got hired by another company that he thought, I think I'd rather work for them. And so he's going to do another training. And I was like, nope, we're not homeschooling them. So
The gravy train is over, kids.
that's right. And it's funny, I always used to threaten them with like, do you want to go sit in school all day long?
Let me show you what a school bus is all about. I'm going to mark you to the corner and show you what the other kids are doing.
That's right.
That's right. That's
awesome.
right. So it's funny.
Wow.
All right.
Well, Anna, we certainly appreciate you taking time from your extremely busy schedule to share a little bit about your journey with Nick and navigating a very, I would say,
tumultuous journey.
Yeah, I was going to say nonstop excitement, never a dull moment.
But
that's
your
right.
train has
That's
come to
another
the station.
thing we say. Never a dull moment.
Yeah. Well, you're almost to second year pay. Then it's all going to happen.
Then I got a big list of gifts coming to me.
Yeah, and the nannies and the butlers, it's all going to come at once. So.
Chick-fil-A every night.
Yeah,
You're going to be driving an Escalade. Who can say? It's going to be awesome.
Oh, boy.
All right, Anna. Well, thanks very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much. You guys have a good one.
Anna had so many great things to say, such great perspective. But I think the thing that I admire the most about her was her attitude.
Yeah.
Like we said, that's the most important.
Yep. She nailed it.
Yeah.
She has a great attitude.
And she gave some financial advice, which we can take, right? Because she's not a pilot, I guess. Kenzie is the guest host. You want to try an ad read?
Absolutely. I love that saying, never take financial advice from a pilot. I'm pretty sure there's a video of me on Instagram saying that and then turning around and panning to the airplane that Max and I purchased.
That's right. I remember that.
So we could
We're in
probably
a positive equity position on that airplane.
we could probably use some financial advice. But Anna had some great points about the importance of saving money, prioritizing spending, and delaying gratification, which we're notoriously not great at. Making financial sacrifices are often part of a lifestyle for aviation families. The good news is that you don't have to make these tough decisions on your own. There's so much help for aviation families. Of course, we're talking about our friend and certified financial planner, Tim Pope, who's been helping professional pilots nationwide create and execute smart financial strategy. Timothy P. Pope, your financial planning partner for all phases of your financial flight. Check the show notes for a link to book your free appointment with Tim. All right, back to the show, boys.
Oh, this is pretty good.
Thanks. Not bad for a rookie.
You could be a freelancer, I think.
Boom.
It'll be good.
I'll be famous.
That's right.
I'll quit my day job.
No.
Well, we got to wrap up with a story. You guys got anything fun to talk about before we go? I've got one I want to hear from you guys, a quick one. Max convinced you that it was a good idea to buy an airplane.
He did.
Why don't you tell us about you guys transporting the airplane from when you picked it up in California to where it needed to go in Colorado? You guys have just a couple minutes, very quickly.
And it's funny because every time I tell this story, Max downplays it. He's like, that's not how it went. It's like, dude, yeah, that's exactly how it went. So we picked up this airplane in Southern California. So we started off with a 6-hour drive from Phoenix.
Relaxing 6-hour drive.
Relaxing, yep. Towing a 40-foot enclosed trailer.
No, it was like 30, I think.
I think it was probably somewhere in between. And we had to disassemble the whole thing, which we had, for some reason, allotted 6 hours of time for.
You're talking about the airplane, yeah.
Yes, disassembling the airplane.
Take the wings off.
The wings, the tail, the landing gear.
By the time we got there, we worked on it for 13 hours. One day, left at 10 o'clock at night, stayed in a hotel, which we weren't planning on doing, and then went back the next morning. And we were supposed to be en route to Kingman to have the motor taken off by 6 a.m. to keep on this timeline that Max had penciled out. We left for Kingman at 3 p.m. So we got to Kingman at midnight or 1 maybe.
Yeah, because we were in LA traffic, right in traffic hour.
Had to figure out how to get Chick-fil-A with this 40-foot trailer, 30 feet, however long it was. So we get there. We stay at the most luxurious hotel in Kingman. And the next morning, I have a call for work from like 9 to 10 or 10:30. So Max says, I'm going to go take the airplane to the airport. We will...
They're like 6 a.m. So it slept like 3 hours.
Yeah.
It's like, all right.
He's like, we'll take the motor off. I'll come back and get you at 10:30 and we'll take the rest of the airplane to its final destination. So it's 10:30. I get off my call and checkout's at 11. Max is like, I can't come get you because the truck has to stay attached to the trailer because the airplane is half out of the trailer. Call and see if you can get a late checkout. So I call, and somehow in Kingman, Arizona, which if listeners don't know is maybe the armpit of our state.
Ooh. Route 66 attractions there.
Come on.
The gateway to Oatman.
It's a great place if you're in a militia.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So I'm right here. And they say, we're completely booked. You have to get out.
Max doesn't have platinum status at the Days Inn.
Does in Ramada,
It was
if I remember correctly.
So I had to pack up my backpack, my suitcase, Max's backpack, Max's suitcase. We illegally snuck the dog in. So I'm now trying to get out of this hotel with all of our suitcases, the dog who's just a felon. And I had to sit at this concrete table in front of the hotel. And I'm in sweatpants and it's like 100 degrees outside. This guy walks up with tattoos on his face, which is fine if that's your thing. It frightened me a little, and asked if he could sit with me. So now Max is at the airport. I'm with the dog on a concrete table, a guy with tats on his face, and Max shows up 3 hours later.
It took longer than expected to get that motor off. It was very complicated. You have no idea.
Okay. One more thing is my favorite part of the story. So then we're driving through Colorado, and we've probably been driving now for 10 hours, and it's maybe midnight. And all of a sudden Max is like, oh my God, Kenzie, it's snowing. And I was like, no, it's not. And it was 77 degrees outside. And he was like hallucinating. So he pulls over and he's like, you have to drive. So we're going through this mountain pass at midnight. I'm driving.
50-foot trailer.
Towing a 50-foot trailer.
Now it's 50 feet.
Yeah, it's just getting bigger. And the speed limit was 45 and I was going 20. Because I'm driving Max's big truck, towing this trailer. And Max wakes up and he's like, how did our ETA go from 40 minutes to 2 hours? And I was like, because I'm going 20. And I just couldn't go faster and he couldn't drive. So needless to say, it was the longest road trip of my entire life. But, you know.
Wow.
And then I was like, this is the stupidest thing we've ever purchased. And then all we did was throw money at it for, 2 years.
But it turned out awesome. So...
It is pretty sweet.
Yeah, we still throw a lot of money at it.
Yeah, well, it's airplanes run on money, not fuel.
I think
That's
Timothy P. Pope would have maybe said that was a bad idea.
No, listen, I could make a very strong case that this airplane is a very good positive equity position. Should I have to divest it, we would be ahead. It's all good.
Timothy P. Pope would be able to deploy those assets and do something very attractive.
I'd like to see that on paper.
That's right. Well, I'd like to thank all of our guests for coming on today. Jackie, Ryan, Yllithia, Anna, thanks for sharing our perspective. Hopefully this episode has been helpful for any potential pilot spouses, folks looking to start an aviation family. And if you didn't find it helpful, hopefully you at least found it funny. Maybe.
All right, a special thanks to our sponsors, Advanced Aircrew Academy, Harvey Watt and Tim Pope. And I think, especially on this episode, we should give a special thanks to our spouses and remind all those aviators out there to thank their spouses also, because as we've heard, being the significant other of an aviator is not always a walk in the park.
A lot of sacrifices need to be made, and it's not for everybody. So I think one thing maybe that I echo that you say, of course, is like recognizing those sacrifices that our spouses make is really important, and you have to continually do that. It's so easy to go out on a trip and be off in a different world and then return back to kind of real life, and shifting those gears, it can be a challenge. And so I think it's important for us to recognize how difficult it is while we are away. So a tip of the cap, hats off to all of the spouses out there that put up with the pilots.
And all
around
the
world.
listeners that haven't done anything nice for their significant other lately, here's your reminder. Get some flowers or a 12-pack of beer or whatever.
Probably not a buddy pass.
Yeah, well, one other thing, Dylan, on the day of this recording, which is February 7th, is anything special about this day that anybody can recall?
Yeah, I could barely get out of bed this morning. I was limping. I had to get up 3 times in the night to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, welcome to the Big 4-0, buddy. Today is Dylan's birthday. He has crested the hill.
Honestly, you look older.
I feel older.
You look incredible.
You know, this
Very
morning,
mature.
Max's youngest son said, Uncle's a little bit young to be bald.
I had the greatest here. So I had the greatest idea. Someday I'm going to fly with another bald guy, and then I'm just going to call it receding airlines.
Oh my God.
No?
I might be your only audience for that joke.
So, if you're looking to get into aviation and you've found love and you want to raise kids, definitely remember flexibility.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just think about it for a long time.
No, you got to finish it off, Kenzie. Flexibility.
Oh, is the key to air power.
There you go.
Okay,
First day.
okay.
First day, everyone.
I wasn't sure if
Sorry
we were
about
giving
her.
advice. Think about it.
See you guys.
Run, God.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.